মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেতনা বিকাশে অঙ্গীকারবদ্ধ থেকে বাংলাদেশের সঠিক ইতিহাস, ঐতিহ্য ও সম্ভাবনার নানা ইতিবাচক দিক তুলে ধরার লক্ষ্যে এবং সুস্থ সংস্কৃতি বিকাশের প্রত্যয়ে অনলাইন টেলিভিশন চ্যানেল ইউকেভিডি টিভি ডিজিটাল বাংলার আলোর মিছিলকে এগিয়ে নিতে লাইক, কমেন্ট, শেয়ার করে আপনিও থাকুন আমাদের সাথে। ইউকেভিডি টিভি, here to serve the community.
Chair, Ambassador Jenny Charette, and then Commonwealth Secretary General, and then the Foreign Secretary will make a presentation, and then Janice will take over as the moderator of the panel discussion. As he joins. Good morning, everyone. I understand our permanent Under Secretary, Ambassador Masood Momin, has joined. I can see him. Assalamu alaikum, sir. With your kind permission, we start the program. Baroness Patricia Scotland, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, His Excellency Hussein Tomasi, who's the advisor to Justice Minister of Gambia. I don't know if he's joined us. The FCDO Minister, he's supposed to join us at 1 o'clock. And our Honorable Foreign Minister will also join us around the same time. Right now, I'm inviting everyone to Bangladesh High Commission London and Canadian High Commission in London's co-hosted high-level discussions on towards sustainable justice, accountability, and returns, the Rohingya crisis into its fourth year. The Rohingya crisis has entered its 4th year. In August 2017, 25 August 2017, when nearly from that day onwards, we had about 750,000 plus Rohingya people from across the border from Myanmar who had entered Bangladesh in the fear of their lives. And they had been forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals who do not want to go back to Myanmar because cleansing will be an illegal identity in that country. They're waiting for these demands. At this juncture, we have organized this program with Canadian High Commissioner, given that Canadian Canada, Myanmar at the International Court of Justice. Also, couldn't join us is the Ambassador of Netherlands, but he would be speaking. He's given a recorded message. It's another country that's joined the International Court of Justice. I want to start by quoting British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was the then Foreign Secretary. He went to Bangladesh in February 2018, and he said, he compared the Rohingya situation with the displacement of Palestinians in 1948. And he said that the plight of the Rohingya and the suffering they have had to endure is one of the most shocking humanitarian disasters of our time. This is a man-made tragedy that could be resolved with the right political will, tolerance, and cooperation from all those involved. Before him, on 4th September, the then Foreign Secretary, Mr. Hunt, Jeremy Hunt, said that there was gang rape, assaults on children, village grace, and in northern Rakhine, mass extermination and mass deportations. This is the kind of issue where countries that believe in civilized values have to take a stand and make sure that justice is done. What I'm trying to say is that UK has been a country which has been consistent on its foreign office of the Commonwealth. And today's program is geared towards where we have participants and panelists who are playing an integral and critical role in the international justice and accountability mechanisms and mandates by the UN, by the ICC or the ICJ. We've got all these experts speaking here in the panel. Why? Because we want to know that what will be the Commonwealth's role in the coming years on the Rohingya issue, our current role under the chairmanship of, currently British is the chair in office, UK is the chair in office, The Commonwealth heads of government in its, as you know that during 2017 August, there was no statement from the Commonwealth when Rohingya crisis started in Bangladesh across the border from Myanmar. However, in 2018, when UK had taken chair in office responsibility, Bangladesh and UK had worked together to put in a very substantive paragraph at the Chogam Towards a Common Future communique, paragraph 50, which says that heads call for a halt to all violence, restoration of normalcy, accountability. It calls for an independent process of investigation to be initiated. It talks about sustainable return of all such displaced Rohingya sheltered in Bangladesh to the rightful homes in Myanmar. And it also takes note of the Rakhine Advisory Kofi Annan Commission and calls upon Myanmar to implement the recommendations of this commission. Of course, we all know nothing like that has happened, but the Commonwealth has since kept it on the agenda of the Commonwealth in the Commonwealth Foreign Ministers meetings. Every time Bangladesh has put this in the, we don't, current General Assembly, UN Security Council, UN HRC, and of course the ICC and ICJ, and even a court in Argentina. There's several international legal justice and accountability mechanisms that are going on. And we wanted to hear from the experts what is their opinion about the future, or how can we go towards a sustainable returns situation? Because it's impossible for Bangladesh to bear this situation. As you know that Bangladesh is currently, the entire Cox's Bazar area will be meet young people from Bangladesh. They always question us as diplomats that why you're a failure as a diplomat? Why can't you send these people back to Myanmar? Why can't you negotiate with them and force them to take them back? So this kind of questions come when we go to Cox's Bazar. 7,000 acres of land have been completely felled. There are no trees, it's completely deforestation. The most critically endangered elephants belong to those 3 protected areas in Cox's Bazar where the Rohingya camps are. Our ecology, our biodiversity, our environment, our social issues, drugs issues, transnational crimes, our security, and even our sovereignty, where international donors try to influence us on our decision-making process, this and that, everything is lost. Why are we lost today? And I hope that everyone will reflect on that during the panel discussion. And to the Chair in Office, United Kingdom, when Lord M comes and joins us. Currently, the FCU, we are connected to the Foreign Office, but also to the Commonwealth Secretary General as to after the Rwanda summit, what kind of action can we ask the Commonwealth to take? Because the Commonwealth hasn't issued any statement except for the communique there and afterwards. And we know that there's provisional measures that have come up. And after, with these 4 values of human rights, and currently is prosperity, peace, democracy. These are the issues that Rohingya issues crying for. It's crying for a sustainable solution. So we want the Commonwealth to play a more active role. And given that one Commonwealth member, a small country, the Gambia, which is about, about 10 million people. It's a small country, but it took the courage of filing a case on behalf of the OIC, backed by the OIC at the International Court of Justice. With these words, I want to say that should the Rohingyas be sent back to Myanmar, how can we do that? Because Myanmar's political will is clearly not there. How can we generate it? Would the accountability and justice system, if we take them to the courts and like Gambia has, and make them accountable and enforce it on Myanmar, would they do it? Would it be possible? We want to hear the expert views. So with these words, I want to say that today we're extremely, extremely honored to have our permanent Undersecretary, our Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Masood bin Momin, who has been a career diplomat, a brilliant career diplomat who served in Italy and Japan, and then our permanent representative. When, during 2017, 25 August, he was our permanent representative in New York. And he really mobilized international opinion of OIC-EU for OIC-EU resolutions. So he's an expert on the issue. We have him presenting the keynote paper towards a sustainable solution, returns of the Rohingyas. And we want to welcome Baroness Patricia Scotland, Commonwealth Secretary General. She has been a champion of human rights and everything that is associated with the Commonwealth, and we hope that she will give us some directions today. And of course, I have my dear friend, Ambassador Janice Charette. She's among the 100 most powerful women in Canada. She's currently, since 2016, High Commissioner of Canada in the UK, but more importantly, she is a very strong voice across the Commonwealth. Throughout the last 2 years that I've seen her, she's very clear in what she wants, and she was the cabinet secretary of her country, a very powerful woman. And I know she's joined us as my co-chair. I'm truly, truly grateful to you, Janice, for that. With these words, I'd like to invite Janice to make her, as my co-chair today, to make her inaugural comments. Janice, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner, Excellencies, Secretary General, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. I want to first express my gratitude for the opportunity to participate as your co-chair for this event today, and for your convening of this important discussion, one which is really of deep concern to all of us. Our congregation here today, despite the fact that it is a virtual gathering, is really, I think, of important significance. This year in particular, yes, I'm finding that same echo. Let me see if I can fix it. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Janice, absolutely loud and clear.
This year marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of Bangladesh's founding father.
Okay, Janice, you're having some issues with your mic. Janice, you're cutting off. I think your internet connection is, yeah, now it's better.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you.
You're talking about the centenary.
I think it's interesting to note that the first international meeting that Sheikh Mujibur Rahman attended following Bangladesh's independence was a meeting of the Commonwealth heads of government that took place in the capital city of Canada in Ottawa, which is my hometown. I'm going to try again with the microphone here.
No, we can hear you nicely. It's fine. The one you're using before is good.
The joys of technology. Maybe if people who are not speaking can close their microphones, that might help with the...
We can hear you absolutely loud and clear. Just go ahead. There's no problem with your
Okay,
mic.
thank you. So the meeting, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that took place was actually hosted by then Prime Minister as his son, our current Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So, Excellencies, I see no better occasion to meet as Commonwealth nations and as friends than on such a notable anniversary to mark our solidarity, really, with Bangladesh and to uphold the values that unite our Commonwealth family on this important issue. As the Bangladesh High Commissioner pointed out, there are over 860,000 Rohingya refugees still remaining in camps in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And there really is, unfortunately, little prospect in the near term of them returning to Myanmar with guarantees of safety, security, or dignity. And I think Bangladesh's humanitarianism and generous hospitality in hosting these refugees, the majority of whom arrived following Myanmar's military clearance operations in August of 2017, really cannot be overstated. And I want to reiterate here today Canada's deep appreciation to Bangladesh for carrying this enormous burden. Canada's position on the gross violation and abuses of human rights in Myanmar is firm and is clear. We've been leading advocates in international fora for accountability for the Rohingya crisis since its outset in August of 2017. This advocacy has included support for the establishment of the United Nations Independent Investigative Mechanism in Myanmar to collect and to preserve the case files for future criminal proceedings, as well as calls for the UN Security Council to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court, targeted sanctions against complicit military personnel, support for the ICC investigation to the crime of deportation into Bangladesh, and most recently our decision to pursue an intervention in the Gambia's case against Myanmar at the International Court of Justice. And I note the presence today of Mr. Hussein Tomasi, the Special Advisor to the Justice Minister for the Gambia, and commend your country's courage and commitment to justice for the Rohingya in bringing this case to the International Court of Justice. Our decision to intervene, taken in conjunction with the Netherlands, aligns with both Canada's strategy to respond to the Rohingya crisis, as well as our values-based foreign policy and our commitment to uphold the international rules-based order. And firm and consistent advocacy for human rights will remain a pillar of Canada's priority in Myanmar and beyond. This firm stance on accountability has been balanced, I believe, with continued work and engagement to address the root causes of this conflict and persecution in Myanmar in order to allow for the eventual voluntary, dignified, safe, and sustainable return of the Rohingya refugees, which is, I think, a goal that we all share. This work includes efforts to promote nationwide peace process and reconciliation, the support for democratization, federalism, and economic liberalization, and initiatives to advance human rights, particularly for women and girls, and persecuted ethnic and religious minorities. Most recently, we've seen a situation where ongoing armed conflict between the Tatmadaw and Arakan army in Rakhine and southern Chin states that have killed hundreds and internally displaced an additional 200,000 civilians. This conflict has been characterized by gross violations and abuses of human rights, including forced displacement, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, the looting and burning of homes and villages, and the blockage of essential food supplies. Canada continues to strongly condemn this violence and urge all parties to end hostilities, to respect their obligations under international law, and resolve their grievances through inclusive political dialogue. In parallel to these efforts, Canada continues to collaborate with the humanitarian and development partners across the globe to provide vital assistance to meet the needs of the Rohingya and address the impacts on host communities and other vulnerable populations. Since 2017, Canada has dedicated more than $112 million in international humanitarian assistance to improve the living conditions of Rohingya in camps and settlements in Cox's Bazar, including support for food aid and health interventions that have benefited as well local Bangladeshi communities. Now, addressing this protracted crisis, including maintaining international support to Bangladesh and the hosting of these refugees and advancing prospects for the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustained return and repatriation of refugees, is going to require an ongoing and concerted effort by the global community. This includes deepened engagement with the ASEAN to encourage Myanmar's full implementation of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State recommendations to address the root causes of conflict and persecution. Now, it is true that the Rohingya crisis is many crises that are being world at the moment. COVID-19 pandemic has seized international attention and has stretched thin the resources of countries all across the globe. But this is no reason to retrench. In fact, COVID-19 has only exacerbated the challenges faced by the Rohingyas and other vulnerable populations in Bangladesh and in Myanmar. And so now, more than ever, international cooperation on this crisis truly is critical. I look forward to hearing today from Rohingya representatives and the needs of about the needs of Rohingya, which I think cut across our borders. That is why forums such as the one we are participating in today are really imperative in keeping the humanitarian, development, and justice needs at the forefront of a coordinated and effective international response. It's really my honor to be joined by all of the participants here today during this auspicious year commemorating the birth centenary of Bangladesh's founding father, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and share as well in the valued and expert views we're going to be hearing in this session and perspectives on how best to advance solutions, concrete, practical solutions for a long-lasting and durable solution to this crisis. I look forward to what I expect will be a fruitful and a dynamic discussion. Thank you very much, High Commissioner, for allowing me to make these introductory remarks.
Problem with your internet, but you can fix it. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introductory comments, and particularly for paying a tribute to our father, the nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who led Bangladesh to Commonwealth, the first international organization where we went. But more importantly, you know, there's a very famous quote by him, and this is my tribute to him on his centenary, is that the world is divided into the oppressed and the oppressor, and I would always stand next to the oppressed. So with these words, I also want to pay a tribute to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who had showed this magnanimity and compassion and given shelter. But in 2017, Channel 4 here in the UK had termed her the mother of humanity. Many don't know that, just wanted to flag it. And also the same year, next year, the 2018, she was Time Personality of the Year. You know, I personally feel this is just an understatement of the kind of humanism that she has demonstrated in the 21st century. And nobody has given shelter to nearly 1 million, more than 1 million people, but Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has. And she should have got something much more accolade for that. With these words, I would like to go back to Patricia Scotland. Baroness Patricia Scotland is the first, again, a very powerful woman. She's the first woman Secretary General of the Commonwealth, but she was also the first person of color who acted as Attorney General of United Kingdom. And she had really helped during the Commonwealth London Chogam in 2018 April, where she also has been supporting the Rohingya issue. Today, she is actually co-hosting it. So we have the logo of the Commonwealth and the invitation card. So thank you very much, Patricia, for all that support. We really look forward to working with you to see how Commonwealth can play a more active role and a more visible role on the Rohingya issue and in protesting the impunity that is going on. You have the floor, Patricia.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever our participants are. Excellencies and friends, a very good morning to you all. At the outset, may I just thank our co-host, the wonderful High Commissioner of Bangladesh, and her brilliant partner, the High Commissioner of Canada. We've been delighted with two magnificent women to start this off, and the compassion of women is particularly something that we need to celebrate today, because the two High Commissioners have been responsible for organizing this event and reminding us that the plight of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, as well as in Myanmar, is still very much a live issue. And I want to especially thank the Honorable Sheikh Hasina for her leadership in response to this crisis and in showing her humanity and the generosity of her people in their response to the Rohingya people. I think she is a proud daughter of the father of the nation. And I'm gratified, therefore, to see the high level and international participation today demonstrating that despite the unprecedented challenges we face in this global pandemic, we are united in our humanity to help our Rohingya brothers and sisters. The Commonwealth family, and indeed the international community, including the United Nations, the European Union, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, have over the years expressed steadfast support for Bangladesh and in calling for an end to the gross human rights violations that have caused more than 1 million Rohingya to flee their homes in the Rakhine state in Myanmar. Excellencies may recall that in 2018, Commonwealth heads of government expressed solidarity with Bangladesh and called for action to address the root causes of the crisis. And Commonwealth heads also commended Bangladesh for providing shelter to the distressed community. I take this opportunity to echo my gratitude to the government and people of Bangladesh for their generosity of spirit in providing safe haven to more than 1 million Rohingya people. We all know the challenges Bangladesh faces as a country of 170 million people, which has been recognized as the most vulnerable in the world to tropical cyclones and is subject to frequent and widespread flooding, soil erosion, sea level rise, and increasing salinization of productive agricultural lands. These are all factors that would challenge the economic growth, development, and social cohesion of any country, more so a less developed country. Yet notwithstanding this, Bangladesh still accepted the hundreds of thousands of families who sought refuge within her borders. I am sure I speak for all when I say that it is in its handling of the Rohingya crisis, Bangladesh has personified the comity and munificence that we strive for as a Commonwealth family, and is an exemplar of the Commonwealth values of tolerance, respect, and understanding. It is also noteworthy that despite the myriad of challenges the country faces, Bangladesh has progressed commitments and shown leadership in addressing the impacts of climate change and advocating environmental protection. Bangladesh is a member of 5 of the Commonwealth Blue Charter action groups on plastic pollution, mangroves, ecosystems and livelihoods, ocean and climate change, sustainable aquaculture, and sustainable blue economy. This year, Bangladesh is also chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and chair of the Vulnerable 20 Group of Finance Ministers for 2020-2022. In the last decade, Bangladesh has also improved on health, sanitation, financial inclusion, and women's political representation, and leads the way on gender parity rating in South Asia. However, like all other countries, Bangladesh has been severely impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, which has led to a decline in global demand for manufactured goods, particularly in the crucial export sectors. The pandemic has exacerbated pressures on the economy, which Bangladesh can ill afford, causing immense strain on infrastructure and impacting health, social, and community well-being. These are challenging times for Bangladeshis as well as Rohingya living in Bangladesh. And while Bangladesh has gone above and beyond in supporting the Rohingya, the responsibility is on all of us to step up to help address the protracted Rohingya crisis. For decades, the Rohingya people in Myanmar have been subjected to increasingly severe human rights violations. The atrocities perpetuated against them in 2016 and 2017 led the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to call their treatment a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Reporting on the attacks of 2017, UN Special Rapporteur Dr. Yangi Lee said that the senior military officers in Myanmar military should be investigated for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. It is an affront to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights and values of the Commonwealth Charter that these crimes against the Rohingya people still continue. The Commonwealth has, throughout our history, stood united against racism and discrimination, and our antipathy to them is written into our charter, inherent to our values and part of our very nature. Our greatest triumphs as a body have been based upon these values, and through them bringing seemingly irreconcilable groups together, and through engagement and dialogue, finding common ground. Similarly, we stand resolute in our support for Bangladesh and for the Rohingya, and call on the people of Myanmar and its government to engage in a way forward on this issue founded upon the universal principles of justice and equality, and based in a peaceful and sustainable return for the Rohingya. We commend the work that's being done by the Gambia and Canada in joining together to make this more likely. And we must and we will stand against the crimes committed against the Rohingya. And I take this opportunity to reiterate the call by Commonwealth heads in 2018 for a halt to all violence and a return to normality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patricia Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth. We're expecting that you would express strong solidarity. We have, Gambia, a Commonwealth member, Canada joining Gambia, and now we have Bangladesh, and now we have the Secretary General. and we're really hoping that the United Kingdom will also join in this group. We are perhaps, like a Friends of Gambia group or something. But, on a serious note, Commonwealth needs to do more on the issue of Rohingya crisis. As Bangladesh's High Commissioner to the Commonwealth, I personally feel that just briefing the member states during the Commonwealth Foreign Ministers meeting is not adequate. There needs to be some action that the Commonwealth needs to take, just like any other international organization that have taken, like OIC. So with these words, I wrap up her comments, and I just want to announce before we give the floor to our Foreign Secretary that Honorable Foreign Minister had joined for a while. I don't see him now, but I know that he'll be joining us soon. At this point, I have the absolute pleasure and honor to give the floor to Ambassador Masood bin Momin, who I already mentioned was Bangladesh permanent representative to New York when the Rohingyas entered Bangladesh, and he had actually mobilized support across the UN system, including the Secretary General's office, the Security Council, the General Assembly, Secretariat, and he really lobbied for one point, that the UN has to take custodianship of the ongoing bilateral efforts of Bangladesh with Myanmar, as well as the crisis, the humanitarian crisis that the UN should be asking questions about and taking care of. Ambassador Masood Momin, I'm giving the floor to Honorable Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Good afternoon from here, and maybe good morning in your place. Her Excellency Baroness Patricia Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, His Excellency Mr. Hussein Tomasi, Special Advisor to the Justice Minister of the Gambia, esteemed panelists, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And we also understand that the Honorable Foreign Minister of Bangladesh is joining, or has already joined, and also His Excellency Lord Tariq Ahmed, the FCDO Minister. I feel honored to be virtually present at the Commonwealth, the first major international organization that Bangladesh joined in 1972 under the unfailing diplomatic leadership of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and his unequivocal conviction in the shared Commonwealth values of democracy, human rights, tolerance, rule of law, and justice. I thank today's co-chairs, the High Commissioners of Canada and Bangladesh, for organizing this event at the Commonwealth and inviting me as the keynote speaker. I commend the Commonwealth Secretary General, Baroness Scotland, for reaffirming her personal and institutional commitment just now to sustain Commonwealth's engagement and support to human rights, justice, and accountability processes for atrocities committed against the Rohingyas and their sustainable return to Myanmar. I look forward to the participation of FCDO Minister, His Excellency Lord Tariq Ahmed, the UK government, especially Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as the chair in office of the Commonwealth, and earlier in his capacity as Foreign Secretary, not only visited the Rohingya camps in Bangladesh in February 2018, but also played a pivotal role in bringing the Rohingya crisis on the Commonwealth's agenda at the London CHOGM. We thank UK also for taking up the pen-holding role on Myanmar at the Security Council, leading the Security Council joint statement on Myanmar on 11 September 2020 and its delegation to Myanmar and Bangladesh in April 2018. We also appreciate UK's generous humanitarian support to the Rohingyas, and also for organizing or co-hosting the event day after tomorrow for the humanitarian or the pledging conference on the Rohingyas. Bangladesh is indebted to all Commonwealth leaders who in 2018 unanimously called for, and I quote, a halt to all violence in Myanmar's Rakhine state, a restoration of normality and accountability of the perpetrators of gross violations of human rights through an independent investigation, and sustainable return of all displaced Rohingyas to their rightful homes in Myanmar, unquote. I must especially commend a fellow Commonwealth country, the Gambia, for taking an exceptionally bold step seeking provisional measures at the International Court of Justice in November 2019 for ending genocide on the Rohingyas by the state of Myanmar. I recognize the presence of His Excellency Hussein Tomasi here and convey through him to his government that the interim order by the ICJ of the 23rd of January 2020 may have been a small step, in delivering justice to the long persecuted Rohingyas, but it was a great leap forward in challenging a culture of impunity there. As the world awaits final outcome of the ICJ case and the ICC proceedings, Bangladesh welcomes the intention of Canada and the Netherlands to intervene in the Gambia versus Myanmar case. Excellencies, as we step into the fourth year of the mass exodus into Bangladesh of nearly 800,000 severely traumatized Rohingyas people fleeing atrocities and persecution in Myanmar's northern Rakhine state, I feel it is important to give a brief account of exactly where do we stand today with the Rohingya crisis. To begin with, we must reflect on why did Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina demonstrate such extraordinary courage and compassion in August 2017 and open up our borders to the Rohingyas, the world's fastest and the largest forced population displacement in less than 3 months. This is because in 1971, during our own War of Liberation, more than 10 million Bengali refugees also fled our homeland, taking temporary shelter in India in fear of similar atrocities, genocide, rape, and war crimes as faced by the Rohingyas. For Bangladesh, it was therefore a moral, ethical, and humanitarian decision to stand beside any persecuted community, whether in the neighborhood or beyond, as was deliberated at the 73rd UNGA by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and I quote, "I can feel the pain and suffering of countless people around the world, persecuted and expelled from their homes like the Rohingya. It is impossible to build peaceful, just, and sustainable societies by ignoring such situations. As a fellow human, we can neither ignore nor remain silent about the plight of the Rohingya." Unquote. Excellencies, the Rohingya crisis is certainly not an outstanding bilateral issue between Bangladesh and Myanmar. We became independent in 71 and they became independent in 1948. In fact, the two countries have amicably settled our land boundary immediately after our independence and maritime boundary also in 2013, all in the spirit of good neighborliness. The Rohingya crisis is born of Myanmar's internal minority issue. Twice before, in 1978 and 1992, Myanmar's Rohingya problem spilled over into Bangladesh when Myanmar perpetrated mass atrocities against its own minority Rohingya community who fled into Bangladesh en masse and compelled Bangladesh to get involved in sending them back to Myanmar. In 1978 and 1992, Myanmar indeed took back almost all its Rohingya, recognizing Rohingyas as lawful residents of Myanmar and members of the Myanmar society. However, in 2017, what Bangladesh and the world witnessed in Myanmar's northern Rakhine state, and from harrowing first-hand accounts of Rohingya who escaped atrocities like mass killings, rape, torture, arson, etc., was a violation of a global proportion. According to UN Human Rights Chief, it was a textbook case of ethnic cleansing, and as per UN fact-finding mission, a pre-planned, well-coordinated, state-endorsed policy aimed at the Rohingya population in the name of so-called clearance operation. The Rohingya crisis, involving around 1 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas, 70% women and children, is no longer Myanmar's internal issue. It is one of the gravest caseloads of international forced displacements with proven crimes of genocide targeted against one ethnic group, subject to racial discrimination, marginalization, and forced statelessness by their own state that systematically took away their political, economic, socio-cultural, and citizenship rights. Excellencies, for Bangladesh, voluntary and urgent repatriation of our 1 million forcibly displaced Rohingyas is a top national priority. Immediately after the 2017 influx, Bangladesh sat with Myanmar and on November 23, 2017, signed 3 bilateral instruments, including arrangement of return of displaced persons from Rakhine State. The arrangement focuses on return of the forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals who entered Bangladesh in 2016 and 2017 through a verification process. Returns are conditional upon restoration of normalcy in Rakhine State by Myanmar, creation of basic conditions of for lives and livelihoods of the Rohingyas, as well as voluntariness. Bangladesh already handed over a list of nearly 600,000 Rohingyas. Till date, Myanmar verified only a few thousand Rohingyas. In 2018 and 2019, Bangladesh tried two mutually agreed repatriation efforts. But each time when repatriation dates were fixed, fresh violence broke out on the other side of the Naf River, creating panic and mistrust amongst returnee Rohingya families. They lost confidence to return and handed to UNHCR a 13-point demand that Myanmar must fulfill with accountable and transparent guarantee as a precondition to return. Since February 2020, bilateral consultations are stalemated due to utter reluctance of Myanmar. Ladies and gentlemen, you would be surprised to know that the 13-point demands of the Rohingyas that Bangladesh already communicated to Myanmar are not only key challenges to voluntary repatriation, but also mirror recommendations of various international justice and accountability mechanisms on Myanmar. They vindicate today's theme that without ensuring justice and accountability for the Rohingyas, their sustainable return to Myanmar remains a far cry. Among the top 5 key conditions of the Rohingyas are, first, a guarantee for an end to their statelessness, more certainty in citizenship, and a rejection of the national verification card that would degrade their status to foreigners. A revision of Myanmar's 1982 citizenship law to recognize Rohingyas as an ethnic minority of Myanmar was a critical recommendation of the Kofi Annan Commission report and also UN fact-finding missions. Myanmar has not complied with either recommendation till date. Second, a guarantee for safety and security of the Rohingyas on their return to NRS and no more torture and killing. Guaranteeing safety, security, and protection of Rohingyas are key measures the ICJ Provisional Order asks Myanmar to guarantee and key purpose of UN Secretary General's global ceasefire appeal under Security Council Resolution 2532 directed at Myanmar military and government. However, as of today, Myanmar blatantly continues to disregard both with more clearance operations on 11 September 2020, flouting UN Secretary General's ceasefire call and Security Council joint statement. Myanmar military amassed troops along the Bangladesh-Myanmar border, leaving Rohingyas in Bangladesh camps in a state of fresh panic. Third, a guarantee for lifting restrictions on freedom of movement and livelihood activities of the Rohingyas on return to NRS. The Kofi Annan Commission and Special Rapporteur on Myanmar both called for lifting of all restrictions on Rohingyas, freedom of movement, access to education, health, livelihoods, and equal opportunities as Rakhines. Till today, Myanmar keeps all Rohingyas in IDPs and denies all rights of Muslims in NRS. Fourth, a guarantee that returnee Rohingyas will not be entrapped in the IDP camps and get back their damaged land and properties. This is precondition of Bangladesh-Myanmar bilateral arrangement on returns too. Unfortunately, Myanmar has allegedly already changed the landscape and demography of Rakhine state by reassigning Rohingya villages to new entities and erasing Rohingyas' ancestral properties. Even UN's mapping unit left out Rohingya villages in the UN maps. Fifth, a guarantee by Myanmar for bringing perpetrators of crimes already committed on the Rohingyas to justice and accountability. The ICJ Provisional Order measures and UN fact-finding mission both found acts of genocide in Myanmar and called for accountability. But Myanmar government has not brought to justice their military and security forces who committed 2017 clearance operations. The provisional measures by ICJ also failed to entail any positive change in the mindset and approach of Myanmar. Myanmar continues restoring to falsification, misrepresentation of facts, unsubstantiated claims, and unjustifiable blame on Bangladesh to deny its own obligations and thereby misguide the international community. The world witnessed yet another round of such efforts on the part of Myanmar during the 75th General Assembly of the UNGA this year, Myanmar also neither complied with the Security Council Presidential Statement 2017/2020 or the joint EU, OIC, UNGA or HRC resolutions that calls for creating conditions conducive to the safe, voluntary, sustainable and dignified return of Rohingyas to their places of origin in Myanmar and ensuring them justice. Excellencies, in summary, rights, justice and accountability issues raised by the Rohingyas must be addressed by the government of Myanmar and international justice and accountability mechanisms before they can expect Rohingyas to return voluntarily from Bangladesh. That brings me to my concluding thoughts for today. Firstly, Bangladesh will continue to bilaterally engage with Myanmar in good faith, in all earnest, and try to bring back on track the dialogue for Rohingya demands and sustainable returns as trust-building measures. The key to sustainable returns of Rohingyas are in the hands of Myanmar government, who can make or break the current impasse in returns. Secondly, Myanmar has defied Commonwealth leaders' call for a halt to all violence in Myanmar's Rakhine state and accountability of perpetrators through independent investigation. At Kigali, a historic name associated with seeking justice for victims of genocide, Bangladesh calls for a declaration on justice and accountability for the Rohingyas. I hope Chair in Office Britain and Chair Designate Rwanda would consider that. Thirdly, Bangladesh calls upon influential regional actors like ASEAN, India, China, and Japan to come forward to engage Myanmar to find durable solutions for the Rohingya returns for the sake of regional peace, security, and stability. Fourthly, all international mechanisms must take tougher actions on Myanmar's compliance of UN Security Council and ICJ provisions for Rohingya justice, accountability, voluntary returns. Fifthly, the global community supporting accountability and justice for Rohingyas include media, civil society, Rohingya rights groups, jurists, lawyers, academia. All must continue campaigns and collective response to ensure accountability by the ICJ and ICC. Finally, over the past 3 years, Bangladesh has been doing its best to shelter 1 million FDMNs in good faith, of course, with the international community's help. However, I must remind the international community that Bangladesh has no intention or capacity to bear this unfair and unjust burden any longer, while the international community allows complete impunity to Myanmar's human rights failures, discriminatory practices, and genocide towards Rohingya minority. I thank you all.
I thank Honorable Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Masud Momin, for his very powerful statement there. Ambassador Momin had made a number of recommendations in his concluding thoughts. I thought the number one was that his expectation or his recommendation is that the Commonwealth, in order to demonstrate more commitment on the Rohingya crisis and the question of accountability, could consider, particularly the chair in office and the chair designate Rwanda. And the Rwanda ambassador could not join us. She does apologize. She had a diary flash, but somebody from Rwanda, have joined this meeting. So he wanted a declaration, a separate declaration during the Kigali summit. And he mentioned that Rwanda, being a country that has been victim to genocide of colossal magnitude, justice and accountability for Rohingyas. A separate declaration has also called for regional role of the ASEAN, where certain regional players who are very influential could look into the issue of now that the entire regime is going towards International Court of Justice, and we hear from the experts, how can ASEAN play a more active role in the accountability question, or at least finding a sustainable solution? And of course, he has mentioned international communities understanding that Bangladesh cannot continue to bear this unjust and unfair burden forever. There has to be a solution to the problem, and culture of impunity has to end for those perpetrators. I thank the Foreign Secretary for giving us guidelines in his keynote speech, despite his very busy schedule. I don't know how long will he stay with us, but I'm extremely grateful to him for joining us today and giving the keynote speech. I would, at this point, I'll be handing over to Janice, but before that, I do want to mention one or two things that today in our high-level meeting, many High Commissioners from across the Commonwealth has joined us and express their solidarity with this program. I want to express my deep gratitude to High Commissioners of Brunei, Malta, Gambia, South Korea, and Ambassador Kyrgyzstan, Ambassador Maldives High Commissioner, Zambian High Commissioner, and also High Commissions of Guyana, Germany, Embassy of Germany. Canadian High Commission in Dhaka has also joined us, Botswana, Belize, Antigua, and Barbuda, Ukraine, and many other high commissions. This is as far as I was reported. I'm sure there are more people. And of course, we have a large Bangladeshi British community diaspora who's joined us, who is very vocal on the Rohingya issue. And I welcome them all to this meeting. I also want to recognize Professor Imtiaz Hussain from Center for Genocide. He has organized quite a few international conferences in Rohingya, including here at UCL. And I just want to acknowledge that he's joined us. Before I hand over to Janice, I want to mention that today in this program, we have tried to bring in two Rohingya representatives. One is Hasina Begum from the camp. She's given a recorded intervention or her statement of how she felt. She was a victim of the clearance operation. We will hear that right after I give the floor to Janice. And also we have the president of the UK's Rohingya People's Association, president of Burmese Rohingya Organization, Mong Thun King. He will be speaking here. So we're very pleased to have the voice of the Rohingyas, which is so important to listen to them as to what happened, that people can make their own judgments as to whether they're Rohingyas or Bengalis. And also we have many distinguished speakers. Just very quickly, I'm saying Nicholas Kumijan, who's the head of the Independent Investigating Mechanism for Myanmar, appointed by the Human Rights Council, Professor Payan Akaban, ICJ Council to the Gambia, Netherlands Ambassador who could join us, but he's got a recorded statement. He had a dentist appointment, but he recorded the statement nevertheless. Dr. Simon Adams from the Global Center for Responsibility to Protect, Professor Yangi Lee, who's joining us from South Korea, former Special Rapporteur to Myanmar. I met her in Bangkok. Miss Antonia Mulvey, former investigator to the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission, and currently Executive Director of Legal Action Worldwide, who's currently working with women, Rohingya women who have been traumatized for gender-based violence. And of course, Ambassador Rhonda couldn't join us. And Krishna MP, she'll be joining us shortly. She's the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Rohingyas. So with these words, I'm going to hand over my phone to my very, very brilliant colleague, Janice, who had given two recommendations: a stronger role of ASEAN. And I do want to mention that Canada is one of the 5 countries who have given sanctions on, targeted sanctions on persons on Myanmar, including alongside with UK, US, Canada, Australia, and the EU. You have the floor, Janice, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. I have the challenge now of trying to move us swiftly through a large number of very, very highly respected speakers who have a lot to say on this topic. But we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to try and move us through smartly. I'm going to start, if I could, with Hasina Begum. Hasina is a Rohingya survivor of the 2017 clearance operations in Rakhine State. She's been sheltering in the camp in Cox's Bazar, and she was in attendance at the International Court of Justice in December of last year, and she's going to deliver us some remarks by pre-recorded video. So can we have Hasina Begum's video now, please?
Assalamu alaikum. Anna Hasina Begum. Ara Asidonga. Shop Parangot. Burma Zalam Hukumote. Ara Zulunguria Ide Pishilam Batanguri. Indilla Diaga Shotor Shalot. August Mashor. Hatas Tariguddin. Roibare. Military. Ara Paragan. Military, mob, police, hina ara paragan girideji. Giridori go korpura developers. Gulio mare. Tarho manu sokol neore pochenti neore jai bare bidian bedan Kuragara point of Gulli Mari, Tampura Marabori, point. Mora Tarokol, Talmajalo, Tanakol, Arborera Kuragara, one of her bosses, very massive, very hard. Other work one end of the military and Maramana. Kurajabit. Sanharanza, my Arbai Guam, Mopani, Armunti, the Zermari. Aramaya one from the Janhe, Aramaya one from the Janore military, the Darway. There is a Parahodian, the Kanish Kulas, Mara, Golai. Golabaze, Ararate, Supandivai, Pandivaza, Arare Requiji. The Gujirin Tim Hansalijan Mayavan Marije, Arafansa Mayavan, Pachi. Arapangari, Taje, Bishi, Postovai. Aram Mura, Gasar Fatahai, Mutwadi, Pania High, Arate, Sundor de Legi. I am on Bangladeshor, Refuge Kamamare, Asi. I was Shanti Mohida member. Ara Rohingya Bisaralabali Hasguri. Ara Maya Windor, Hokor Babute Hasguri. Ara Maya Windloy, Morotnoy, Borabodian Alabali, Arayan Allah Hasguri. Ara Maya Windore, and Powers Monabalabali, Yan about the Hasguri. Arare Muhammad Zindihani Mare Armaradara Gorina Varapan Hadina Varapan Arara Maradara Gorina Varapan Hadina Varapan Arati Bisargan Bisidorhar Arad Deshamare Ara Tyrants of Manile Varapan Ara Deshamara Ara Shantigur Taivan, no Comacol, Zendila Solivar, Are Handila Solivarivan, Arati Bisargan, Bishidorhar. Aran Munti also by Marivalai by Marivalai R is Jotora Hani Tanara Wangaro Junusa Sile Yan or Bisargan, I say. I hear Allah Shaza side. Assalamu alaikum.
What an incredibly powerful video. Took a huge amount of courage for Hasina Begum to share that with us, and it reminds us all about what we're doing and what this is all about. So we thank her for that. Can I turn now to Mr. Nicholas Kumjian, head of the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar under the UN Human Rights Council. Mr. Kumjian has been the first head of the Myanmar mechanism established in 2018 with over 35 years of experience as a prosecutor, including almost 20 years of experience in the field of international criminal justice. Mr. Kumjian, please. Mr. Kumjian, we can't hear you, so if you're speaking, you're on mute, sir. Let me make sure he's unmuted, please.
He's unmuted. He's already unmuted.
The challenges of our video technology world these days. That's perhaps
Can't even hear. Is Microsoft working? He just sent a message. I'm getting a message that my phone stopped working. Next call.
My mic is open.
It takes call.
Maybe I should move on to the next speaker and come back to Mr. Kumjian. Would that make sense then? Thank you. Can I now move to Professor Payam Akavan, who is a Canadian human rights lawyer, also an international lawyer, member of the and a senior fellow at the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And Professor Akavan, if you can make your remarks now, please.
Thank you, Madam High Commissioner. Greetings to the High Commissioner of Bangladesh, the Honorable Secretary General of the Commonwealth, and all the other distinguished guests that have been assembled. I'm humbled to be following the presentations of my sister Hasina Begum, who was one of 3 Rohingya survivors that formed part of the delegation of the legal team of the Gambia at the historic hearings in December of 2019. And she is a reminder that justice is not an abstraction, that genocide is not just a legal concept, but that it is a living reality for the some 1 million refugees and survivors who are in terribly difficult conditions in Bangladesh. And I had the opportunity to be in Kutupalong camp just some weeks ago to see how important it was for the survivors to have some measure of accountability, however inadequate, simply to have their stories told to the world. Some time ago, when I visited Kutupalong for the first time, I was confronted by a number of survivors who demanded justice. And it's very painful to have to explain political realities to people, to explain to them why it is that the world is turning its back on them. And I believe that we have made significant progress, and that there's great cause for hope. First, the International Criminal Court's investigation into the crime against humanity of deportation based on the territory of Bangladesh, given that Myanmar is not a state party, given that the Security Council has failed to refer Myanmar to the International Criminal Court, was a very important start. But it left unaddressed the crime of genocide, which is committed on the territory of Myanmar. And it was in that regard that we found our champion in the nation of the Gambia, and I recognize the Honorable Mr. Tomasi, who will be addressing you later. And I cannot speak enough about the significance of the leadership which the Gambia has exercised, or the importance now of the Canadian and Dutch governments indicating that they will intervene in this case. As you're aware, in December of 2019, the International Court of Justice had a hearing on provisional measures. And on the 23rd of January of this year, we received a historic 17-0 unanimous judgment by the International Court of Justice, holding that Myanmar is under an obligation to take all possible measures to prevent future acts of genocide. Our dear brothers and sisters from Kutupalong sent me very touching photographs of themselves holding up signs, "Thank you, Gambia," with big smiles in Kutupalong camp. And that once again was a reminder of why justice matters, why we cannot remain indifferent. This Friday, October 23rd, the Gambia will file its memorial before the International Court of Justice. Myanmar will then have an opportunity to file its counter memorial, or possibly to file preliminary objections to jurisdiction. We have had resounding success thus far, but there is a long road ahead. The road to justice will require continued engagement and support by the international community. And I will end simply with the age-old adage that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So it is reassuring for me that there is this assemblage of highly influential conscientious people who are lending their support to this worthy cause. And I hope that our Rohingya brothers and sisters will see better days ahead. Once again, thank you very much for giving me the honor of participating in this event.
Thank you very much, Professor Ackerman, and thank you for the work that you're doing to go through the formal legal processes of bringing justice around these matters. It's very much appreciated. Do we have Mr. Kumjian's microphone?
Yes, I hope you do. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Following the reports of the fact-finding mission that was established by the Human Rights Council, disturbing reports about serious international crimes having been committed in Myanmar, both in Rakhine State and in other parts of the country, and reports by the Special Rapporteur, Ms. Yangi Lee, who will be speaking in a few minutes, NGOs and others, that these serious international crimes were taking place, the United Nations' highest human rights body, the Human Rights Council, decided to establish a mechanism, and that is what the body that I now head, the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, with the mandate to collect evidence of these potential crimes, to consolidate that evidence and preserve it, and analyze whether the evidence is sufficient to prove individual criminal responsibility. Now, the fact-finding mission, the mechanism, my mechanism, is not a court itself. We are a body created with the authority to create these case files and share them with courts that are willing and able to exercise jurisdiction over these crimes, provided that these courts are willing to engage in real substantive cases that will follow all the requirements of international law and basic requirements of justice, and that will protect the privacy and security of witnesses and others that have provided information. So that is the mandate that we have. So what's the advantage? Why was this created? What is the advantage of collecting this evidence if we ourselves are not a court that could arrest someone or put someone on trial? Well, I think what was recognized by everyone is that international justice is often a very long process. But it's very, very important that these evidence is preserved for eventual criminal proceedings. Before coming to the mechanism, I worked at the court in Cambodia. In that case, we prosecuted cases. The proceedings began 28 years after the crimes had ended. And we ended up holding responsible the highest living surviving members of the Khmer Rouge leadership almost 40 years after the crimes were committed. Our mandate covers the territory of Myanmar. It covers, of course, the crimes against Rohingya people, but it also covers crimes against any human being in Myanmar if they are a serious international crime. Serious international crimes include genocide, it includes war crimes and crimes against humanity. So we're preserving this evidence, and we need and seek the cooperation of many of those of you on this phone call. In order for us to collect this evidence, first of all, of course, we need the cooperation of people like Ms. Hasina Begum. And we understand her desire for justice and the desire of her organization to assist justice. We understand that for refugees who have fled the country, they fled for a reason. And accountability for those responsible for crimes is an important element to creating the conditions where people can return. People will not want to return to the same location where those who are responsible for very serious crimes against their relatives continue to exercise the same power with impunity. So it's very important that there be a mechanism, a process to end the impunity for these very serious crimes. We also depend on the cooperation of states. We ourselves need the authority of a state or the permission of a state to operate in their territory. So while we will continue to reach out to Myanmar for their cooperation, we haven't received that so far, but we have also engaged with many other states and states in the region. I can tell you we are very pleased with the cooperation that Bangladesh has shown us to date in assisting our work. And we look forward to working particularly with other states in the region, getting their cooperation so that we can conduct our work to preserve this evidence as necessary. For those who've been expelled from their country, it's been over 3 years. That is a very long period of time to be waiting for justice. Unfortunately, in international criminal law, 3 years is a very, very short time for these very complex processes of gathering evidence and linking it to those who would be responsible at a higher level for any organized crimes that took place. But it's very, very important by conducting our work and communicating what we are doing that people understand we're watching what's going on in Myanmar even today. If crimes are committed today, if they're committed tomorrow, we'll be gathering that evidence. And it's very important for those in the camp, people like Hasina Begum, to know we're here, we're working towards what she has asked for, that eventually there will be justice for these crimes. 3 years is a long time, but these people, these refugees are not forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kunjan. I think that the work that you're doing obviously is very important, and the time lags that could be involved could be significant. So the collection of this evidence is no doubt a painstaking but very critical component of the pursuit of justice. I'm going to turn now to a pre-recorded video that's going to be shown, recorded by His Excellency Karel van Oosterom, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands here in the United Kingdom. Ambassador van Oosterom previously served as the permanent representative of the Netherlands to the UN in New York, including when the Netherlands was a member of the UN Security Council in 2018. So if we can please show Ambassador's video now.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thanks so much to Bangladesh and to Canada for organizing this important and timely event. It has been 3 years since the exodus of Rohingya refugees to Bangladesh. And I remember vividly when this happened, and 1 year later, in 2018, the Kingdom of the Netherlands was in the Security Council. And I served on the council in that year, and one of our biggest frustrations was that it was not possible to achieve a sustainable solution for the return of the Rohingya refugees to Myanmar. 3 years onwards, many of them would still like to return to their homes. We still have a long way to go to ensure that this can be done in safety and dignity, and in a voluntary and sustainable manner. Meanwhile, it is important that the Rohingya refugees have found refuge in Bangladesh. The Kingdom of the Netherlands has deep appreciation for Bangladesh for its continued efforts to host Rohingya refugees. The international community has pledged strong support to both forcibly displaced Rohingya refugees and to host communities. And we hope that Bangladesh will also continue to accommodate those efforts. The Kingdom of the Netherlands remains deeply concerned about the Rohingya crisis. We all have a responsibility to protect, and it's important that Simon Adams of the Global Center joins us for this conversation today. A lasting solution for the situation in Rakhine State and other parts of Myanmar is only possible if there's no impunity. Justice and accountability for gross violations of human rights and international humanitarian law are necessary to foster conditions for durable peace and national reconciliation in Myanmar. And that all regardless of the perpetrators. Accountability for the most serious crimes is one of the human rights priorities of Dutch foreign policy. It is a key element in the promotion of the international legal order, a constitutional obligation in my country, and it's a key element in strengthening human rights. The Kingdom of the Netherlands therefore supports accountability efforts, specifically the investigation of the International Criminal Court, and also the investigation of the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar. We will continue to call on the authorities of Myanmar to grant full access and to fully cooperate with the aim to achieve accountability. On the 2nd of September of this year, the Kingdom of the Netherlands issued a joint statement together with Canada. We expressed our joint intention to intervene in the case brought by the Gambia against Myanmar before the International Court of Justice. As part of this intervention, we will assist with the complex legal issues that are expected to arise. And we will pay special attention to crimes related to sexual and gender-based violence, including rape. Accountability means that we hold those responsible to account and that we do not let impunity prevail. We have a responsibility towards the victims of the most serious crimes to do so. This is also embodied in the Genocide Convention, which contains a solemn pledge to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. As a state party to the Genocide Convention, the Kingdom of the Netherlands considers it our obligation to support these efforts. These are of concern to all of humanity. We continue to call on other state parties to the Convention to support the Gambia in its efforts to address the violations of this Convention before the International Court of Justice. In conclusion, impunity will not prevail. Perpetrators will be held accountable. That is what the victims and the refugees expect from us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those comments, and also I underline the strong partnership between Canada and the Netherlands in support of the work led by the Gambia, and the invitation to other state parties to join in support of this action to seek accountability for the victims here and to eliminate any risk of impunity. You heard the ambassador refer to Simon Adams, and he is our next speaker. Dr. Adams is the executive director of the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect, which is the world's leading research and advocacy organization for advancing the international norm of the responsibility to protect. And the center does very important work to prevent mass atrocity crimes, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing, really across the world, including at the United Nations. If I can call on Dr. Adams now, please, to make his comments.
Thank you for that introduction. And I guess the pressure is on with those very kind comments by yourself and by the Dutch ambassador as well. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by thanking the Commonwealth and Bangladesh and the Canadian High Commission to the UK for this very timely event. I'd especially like to extend special gratitude and acknowledgement to the government of Bangladesh for continuing to host 1 million Rohingya refugees. We know that is an immense challenge, especially during a global pandemic, and Bangladesh deserves the international community's continued support and gratitude. And in relation to our topic today, I think the ugly truth we all have to recognize is that prior to August 2017, there had been more than a decade of warnings from human rights organizations about the system of persecution and ethnic apartheid that Myanmar had imposed upon the Rohingya. And in the more than 3 years that have now passed since the military's genocidal clearance operations began, we should not forget that the UN Security Council has still not adopted a single binding resolution on the situation in Myanmar. And I think this inertia is all the more appalling given that all states who are signatories to the UN Genocide Convention are obligated to prevent and to punish that crime. In 2017, I think it's true to say that the entire Security Council were informed, were aware, were fully briefed on the extent of the horrors that were underway in Rakhine State. They had access to multiple reports, intelligence sources, expert briefers, but due to the threat of a Chinese veto, not a single draft resolution was ever put forward for a vote. Not then and not since. Thankfully, I think it's also true to say that the wider struggle for justice in Myanmar is not subject to a Chinese veto and did not end in 2017. Concerned states and civil society organizations working with Rohingya survivors, including very brave survivor who we heard speaking earlier, have continued to push for accountability. And partly as a result, we've seen the EU, the United States, Australia, and Canada, of course, all impose targeted sanctions on senior members of Myanmar's military who were implicated in genocide. And then, of course, as has been mentioned, finally, in 2019, it was announced that the Gambia would take Myanmar to the International Court of Justice. I think it's therefore fair to say that the Gambia, which we should recall is the smallest country on the African continent, has already done more to uphold its responsibility to protect than the entire UN Security Council. Some other states now, like Germany, are following its lead and are reviewing their trade, investment, and development programs in Myanmar, ensuring that they do not reinforce discriminatory structures or enable perpetrators of genocide to profit from the seizure of Rohingya lands. And I also absolutely commend Canada and the Netherlands for their announcing that they will intervene in the case at the ICJ as well. We need more states to show this kind of leadership. And as has been mentioned, there is also an investigation at the ICC and a universal jurisdiction case in Argentina. So the struggle for accountability continues. And while I think the ICJ case and bilateral sanctions should be expanded, and I think they send a powerful message to Myanmar's generals, they also, I think, provide a warning to the UN Security Council itself. Because if the Council fails to uphold its core responsibility to maintain international peace and security, which includes preventing mass atrocity crimes, then it is destined for obsolescence. States who continue to believe in human rights and international law will look for other ways and means of upholding these norms and these laws. And I think the future of international justice may now depend upon the political will of committed states like the Gambia, like the Netherlands, like Bangladesh, like Canada, who are prepared to act when the UN Security Council won't or can't. Let me just say finally that the Rohingya have already suffered so much. And in that context, one of the most crucial issues where I think we really need to coalesce around and push for, and that absolutely still needs to be addressed, is the question of citizenship. The international community must continue to emphasize the importance of Myanmar's authorities granting the Rohingya full citizenship rights. That includes repealing Myanmar's deeply flawed and discriminatory 1982 citizenship law. That would help encourage Rohingya refugees to believe in the future possibility of a safe and voluntary return to their home country. Finally, as we know, because of ongoing discriminatory policies, the vast majority of Rohingya who remain inside Myanmar will not be able to vote in the upcoming general elections in November. Thus, they'll be denied the opportunity to participate yet again in the political life of their country. So let me end by saying that a democracy that systematically persecutes and excludes people on the basis of their ethnicity or religion, a democracy that is built on the bones of people who have been subjected to genocide, is not a real democracy at all. It is a government that is living in a state of denial. And so it is to the entire international community, I believe, to continue to stand with the Rohingya and to continue to stand up for international justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adams. I'd like to recognize that the UK Minister, Lord Ahmed, has now joined us, and he is on the line listening to the proceedings. Lord Ahmed is the UK Minister for South Asia and the Commonwealth at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and is a very active and powerful and influential member of the FCDO ministerial team, and we are delighted to have Lord Ahmed on the line with us as we finish the last few speakers on our panel. So welcome to you, Lord Ahmed. I'm going to turn now to Professor Yangi Lee, who is the former Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar. He held that role from 2014 to 2020. And Professor Lee, she is currently the professor at, Sungyeon Kwan, apologies if I've pronounced that miserably, University in Seoul, and she serves on the advisory committee of the National Human Rights Commission in Korea. So Professor Lee, if I can call on you now, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. I'd like to thank the High Commissions of Bangladesh and Canada and the UK and the Commonwealth Secretary General for co-hosting this very important event. I had completed 6 years of the mandate at the end of April. Those years, I must say, were one of the most difficult years of my life. I had access to Myanmar for half of my mandate, and then the second half I was declared persona non grata. Back in 2017, I had raised the alarm about the situation unfolding in the Rakhine state of Myanmar. I had indicated that the situation, quote unquote, bears the hallmarks of genocide. I also issued a statement on 9 October 2017, questioning why a full military battalion was deployed to northern Rakhine. The area was already under curfew and heavy surveillance since the October 9, 2016 alleged attacks by ARSA, which led to heavy security operations, driving about 80,000 to Bangladesh. It seemed very strange why a full battalion had to be deployed, only to hear about the 25th August alleged attacks by ARSA. Consequently, the military conducting security operations that drove out about 700 plus to Bangladesh. It was very odd to me back then. And so this was an early warning that I had issued about the movement of the full battalion to heavily militarized area anyway. We must never forget the nature of the mass exodus of Rohingyas into Bangladesh. It is now the 4th year. We must not lose sight that the problem originated in Myanmar, deliberately planned and executed to drive out the Rohingyas from Rakhine. The UN and the international community must devote heightened effort to find solutions for safe, voluntary, dignified, and sustainable return of the refugees back to their places of origin in Myanmar. The blazing of the houses during the 2017 so-called clearance operations had a definite plan to leave nothing that can identify the Rohingya back to their place of origin. It was easier to build new buildings and roads on blazed ground. Names of villages have already been changed and new maps were produced with these changes. This is a stark resemblance of the scorched earth campaign that took place decades ago in eastern Myanmar, forcing many to flee to neighboring Thailand. Still, more than 100,000 refugees live along the border. The targeting of civilian areas by the Myanmar military through airstrikes and artillery attacks is a hallmark of the conflict in Rakhine State in 2020. These are still continuing. Now the difference is that they are now predominantly targeting the Rakhine community. I strongly believe that crimes against humanity and war crimes were committed against the Rohingya. And of course, I have already stated that the situation bared all the hallmarks of a genocide. Reports of new evidence and indiscriminate attacks on civilians, disappearances, extrajudicial killings of civilians, massive displacement, arbitrary arrests, torture and deaths in custody, and destruction of civilian property. Verification is difficult to the shutdown of mobile internet access in the affected areas, which has lasted about 2 years now, plus restrictions on reporting by local media. On 16 October, the Union Election Commission announced that election will not be held in 9 townships in northern Rakhine, 15 wards, and 137 village tracts from 4 townships in central Rakhine. These are districts where the NLD, the current Aung San Suu Kyi's party, does not have a strong hold. And in other areas in eastern Rakhine, some election polls will not be opened, and these are also ethnically stronghold areas. There are many developments towards accountability, as my previous speakers have noted, to the ICC and the ICJ. I will not go into these in detail. However, how can Myanmar comply with the ICJ orders? First and foremost, I have repeated many times, stop the violence against the Rohingya, stop all discrimination against the Rohingya by law, policy, and practice. Second, stop armed conflict in Rakhine and destruction and building new roads and buildings, because evidence needs to be preserved. Additionally, all the maps have new names, must go back to the ones pre-August 2017. Third, bring the entire government and security forces under civilian control and initiate extensive legal reform, including the Constitution, land laws, the citizenship law, and laws that violate fundamental rights such as freedom of expression, assembly, and religion. If you have seen Madame Aung San Suu Kyi speaking at the ICJ, she admitted during the ICJ hearings in The Hague that the military may have committed war crimes and that they will undertake further investigations. It is entirely doubtful that those most responsible will ever be held accountable as war crimes do not exist within Myanmar's domestic law. Furthermore, under the Defense Services Act 1959, the only human rights violations that are criminalized are murder, culpable homicide, and rape. UN is calling on Myanmar government to conduct an impartial and transparent investigation into the deaths of 2 children in Rakhine allegedly used by the Tatmadaw as human shields. 5 October in Butidong Township, a clash between security forces and the army had occurred. 15 local farmers, including these 2 children, were alleged to have been forced to walk in front of a Tatmadaw unit to ensure the paths towards the military camp was clear of landmines and to protect the soldiers from potential enemy fire. Well, fighting broke out and 2 boys were found dead. More than 100 children in the year of 2000, in the first 3 months of 2020, have died during conflict. This is more than half of the total number in 2019. This happened within 1 year of delisting the Tatmadaw from the Secretary General's list for underage recruitment. The delisting should never have happened. Using children for non-combat purposes is just as bad as enlisting them as child soldiers. I would like to take this opportunity to make further recommendations to the international community. First, the UK should explore the possibility of joining Canada and the Netherlands in the case against Myanmar, the ICJ. Second, states should not engage anymore in business activities with the Tatmadaw. The FFM listed many companies that are actually owned by the Tatmadaw, their family or their associates. Allow me to give you a quick update. Major public pension funds in Canada continue to hold shares in businesses that maintain partnerships with the Tatmadaw. Canadian companies also share in Kirin Holdings, which the military conglomerate, Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited, owns 48%. And Kirin Brewery owns 51% ownership of Myanmar Brewery. Kirin Holdings, POSCO, and Adani Ports and SCZ were all identified by the 2019 FFM report as foreign companies in commercial relationships with military-owned businesses. Several Canadian companies hold shares in POSCO, unfortunately, South Korean company, in a steel venture with MEHL. Failure to act sends a dangerous signal that involved governments are condoning continued business relationships with the military and profiting from it. Updating of sanctions lists and enforcing them is crucial. While 45 individuals are listed, the current military leadership and directors of military-owned and associate businesses are not. For instance, Commander-in-Chief, has the responsibility of the Rohingya genocide, is currently not sanctioned. This needs to be urgently updated. The full military leadership needs to be sanctioned, as well as a comprehensive list of individuals who are part of the military's economic interests in order for sanctions to serve their purposes. Next, the UK Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation under the HM Treasury published its annual report of 2019 to 2020 on 9th of October. Unfortunately, it was reported that no assets from individuals from Myanmar reported to be frozen. Asset freeze will be a strong action against Myanmar military in response to the alleged genocide. As we are approaching voting election period, the M-Voter 2020 Election Act that was launched on 29 September as part of the EU-funded STEP Democracy project implemented by the International IDEA and in partnership with Asia Foundation and the Union Electoral Commission. The app profiles every candidate for election by race and religion, as well as the race and religion of their mother and father, using official categories which candidates have little or no choice over. Candidates and parties were apparently unaware that their data was going to be used in an app. For the remaining Rohingya candidates who have not been disqualified, the app lists them as Bengali, which erases Rohingya identity, implying they are illegal migrants from Bangladesh, excuse me. Canada is a member state of the International IDEA and therefore has a duty to ensure that IDEA is not violating the rights of Rohingya and other minorities. I hope as a result of today's discussions, we will be able to get closer to accountability and the possibility of the Rohingya now in Cox's Bazar to finally go home. Back in March of 2019, we had the privilege of hearing Hamida and Muhibullah, two refugees from Bangladesh, with the help of Bangladesh government, Canada, and the Swiss government and other interlocutors, when they shared their experience to the Human Rights Council. I thank you for allowing me to make an intervention in this awesome panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. Very much appreciated your insights, and you obviously have a sweep of history involved in this situation. So very, very important comments. Can I turn now to Ms. Antonia Mulvey, who is the former investigator to the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar and the Executive Director of Legal Action Worldwide. Ms. Mulvey is an expert in sexual and gender-based violence for UN Women, the Justice Rapid Response Unit, and the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office Preventing Sexual Violence Initiative. Unfortunately, I mentioned my tough job is to try and keep us on time. We are running a bit behind, so if I can ask my next speakers to try and stay as close as they can to time, with apologies for short-circuiting anybody here. Ms. Mulvey, can I turn to you now, please?
Good afternoon and good evening, and thank you very much to the Government of Bangladesh, Canada and the Commonwealth Secretary General for the invitation to be on this distinguished panel. I'm delighted to be here. Now today I want to talk about international justice as an entry point for healing. I would like us to go back to September 2017, where I was on the border of Myanmar and Bangladesh as an investigator for the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar. It was a scene that many of us will never forget. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya fleeing across the border. It was a sea of people fleeing for their lives. Over the subsequent months and years, I have interviewed hundreds of Rohingya survivors of sexual violence, many of them children. I will remember all of their stories, but there is one in particular that I would like to share with you today. A woman who was 8 months pregnant when the Tatmadaw soldiers beat her, stripped her naked, tied her to a tree by her hands, and 9 of them gang raped her. Subsequently, her unborn child died. She had waited an entire day to speak to me, and when I asked her why, she said what she wanted was justice. Nearly 2 years later, her journey for justice had commenced, notably on Human Rights Day, 10th of December 2019, when her words from that interview were read out in the International Court of Justice hearing of Gambia versus Myanmar. The enthusiasm for those proceedings cannot be overstated, and an important part of that was the Rohingya victims being present, and also the presence of Aung San Suu Kyi at the court. Thousands of Rohingya watched the court proceedings in the camps in Bangladesh, and in January 2020, the court unanimously ordered provisional measures against Myanmar. And indeed, Rohingya watching from our centre in Cox's Bazar were repeatedly cheering, and we heard it before, "Thank you, Gambia." Today, there are multiple and intertwined journeys of international justice, and each one is important to the Rohingya and for accountability in different ways. Indeed, the pre-trial chamber of the International Criminal Court noted in its decision authorising a full investigation. According to the registry, victims unanimously insist that they want an investigation by the court. But justice means more than legal accountability for what has happened in the past. As we heard from Hasina, who we represent, justice means access to healthcare, to education, to livelihoods, to citizenship, and to an equal footing with other ethnic groups in Myanmar, and it means hope. Law represents more than 500 Rohingya who fled the 2016 and 2017 clearance operations, who are now living in the camps in Bangladesh today. A vast majority of them are women. This includes the Shanti Mahila, which means peace women, a network of Rohingya women, of which Hasina, you heard earlier, is a member. Many have lost their husbands, their children, or other family members. Many are survivors of brutal sexual violence. We also represent male survivors of sexual violence. They were raped, sexually tortured, including mutilation of their sexual organs. We strive to ensure that their stories and experiences are heard by the international community, and that the evidence of these survivors meaningfully contributes towards the fight for justice. We support them to speak about their experience in a way which reclaims their narrative, which is secure, avoids re-traumatization, and which is undertaken with a clear purpose. And through this, survivors of some of the most brutal crimes have been empowered. Victims have become survivors, survivors have become advocates. Even male survivors of sexual violence, around them which remains significant stigma, have become leading voices in the call for justice for the Rohingya. In this way, justice is not a tool to secure accountability, rights of redress, but part of a transformative healing process, a process that involves the whole community and may take decades. And finally, I'd like to finish with 3 recommendations. Firstly, we must continually to proactively support multiple international justice processes. It remains highly unlikely that real accountability can be secured within Myanmar at this time. Countless times we've heard Myanmar's military and government deny any substantive wrongdoing. It is therefore critical that the international community unequivocally support the complementary international justice processes. Secondly, high quality and impartial legal information, assistance and representation are vital. Participation of the Rohingya in international justice processes is important and should continue. And at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank member states, particularly the government of Bangladesh, who've supported us to take Rohingya to The Hague and Geneva. However, recognizing the ability of Rohingya to travel, we have formally requested the International Criminal Court to consider the possibility of proceedings taking place in Bangladesh so that the affected population can better participate. Finally, we need to hear a wider pool of Rohingya voices, Rohingya women, Rohingya with disabilities, LGBTQI Rohingya. They must be empowered to participate. The power of the Rohingya community to act as agents of change and to address the horrific crimes they have experienced is immense. They need our help to harness it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The work that you and your organization have done to try to help to capture these voices, I think, is incredibly important, and I appreciate your recommendations as well. Can I turn now to Mr. Maung Tun Kin, who is the president of the Burmese Rohingya organization in the United Kingdom, which has been a leading voice for Rohingya people around the world. Before I turn to Mr. Tun Kin, may I just recognize, and I apologize for not having done this sooner, the foreign minister from Bangladesh, His Excellency Dr. A.K. Abdul Momen, has joined us for some time and has been listening to the proceedings throughout this panel, if I'm not incorrect. So, Minister, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for being with us through this entire conversation so far, and we will turn to you very shortly We have just 3 speakers left in our panel, including Mr. Tun Kien, who I'll turn to now. So, sir, if you can make your intervention, please.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to take part at this timely event. I would like to express many thanks to Ambassador to UK, Ambassador to UK, and also co-host, from the Netherlands, hosting this event, which is very important for the justice mechanisms and for the Rohingya issue. I would like to express many thanks to Bangladesh government, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and all the people of Bangladesh for hosting our Rohingya genocide survivors, 1 million about, for 3 years now. You have shown generosity, humanity, for our Rohingya brothers and sisters. Firstly, I am a Rohingya. I was born and brought up in Arkhana State, Butidon Township. Along with 200 plus Rohingya, my parents fled country on foot into neighboring Bangladesh in the spring of 1978 during Burma fast-scale campaign against Rohingya named King Dragon Operation. They were repatriated back to Burma in the autumn same year. A few years later, I was born and resettled in Northern Arkan. My paternal grandfather, Mr. Abdul Ghaffar, was a parliamentary secretary during Prime Minister Unu's sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Tun Kien.
UNU parliamentary government, British educated Burmese national, a Rohingya man. My grandfather served the newly independent Burma. 2 generations on, I, as his grandson, is now nationality-less, refugee living in United Kingdom. In spite of our ancestral roots in Western Burma, I have been denied citizenship and nationality in Burma. The military government issued me only a temporary registration card known as white card. It indicates neither citizenship nor foreigner. I had lived in that legal twilight zone all my life in Burma. The younger generation of Rohingya, including me and my peers, have been barred from studying at universities and colleges in Burma. In the past, during parliamentary period, the Rohingya student forms official Rohingya Student Association, cultural organizations in Rangoon, not anymore. Rohingya have been crying out for international solidarity, support to end their collective nightmare. The nightmare of us, a strip of our nationality status by none other than Burmese government since 1917. The nightmare of us made us stateless, citizenshipless, homeless, all our ancestral land, Burma, not former Eastern Pakistan or Bangladesh, is the only home we feel and we do belong. When I was in Arkhana State, I couldn't move from one village to another. When I need to move from, like, for example, from Cox's Bazar to Dhaka, I need to get a pass. It takes 2 to 3 days and I have to bribe. That's what I faced. I couldn't go to the university, even though my grandfather graduated, in Burma, and I couldn't go to the university. My father did government service, more than 20 years. My father graduated in Burma. I couldn't go to the university. And I have seen, while I was in Arkhana State, my eldest brother's friends, they were waiting 2 to 3 years to get marriage certificate. And finally they got, after they bribe it, after 2 years, they can get it. And my father's own land been confiscated by Burmese government and military, and they kept under of military. And then they brought up from central Burma, other Burmese people, and they settled them there. We need to provide food for them. Because of those kind of continued persecution, first they they taken away our ethnic rights. During democratic period time, when my grandfather was a member of parliament, my mother's grandfather was the first judge in Northern Arkan. And on that time, Rohingya language was broadcasted 3 times a week. and they still deny Rohingya not exist, you know. And, you know, that time, Rohingya have right like other nationalities of Burma. And 1961 to 65, when Rohingya language broadcasted 3 times a week, and that time, many other ethnic groups have respected to Rohingya group as like, you know, as before like that. And, you know, on that time, 1962, when General Ling took power, he stripped up our ethnic right first. And then 1978, he operated a King Dragon operation, driven them Rohingya more than 250,000. On that time, he taken away our citizenship rights. And then restriction on movement, restriction on education, restriction on marriage, and then confiscation of lands. This has been going on many years. The intention is destroying our community with intention to destroy our community. It's been going on many years. So I'm lucky enough to be here today to talk about on behalf of our brothers and sisters. I remember, you know, one thing today, when I have visited many times to the camps. When I visited to the camps, one word, unitedly, I heard from our brothers and sisters, genocide survivors. I spent 4 weeks in 2017. One word unitedly I heard: we want justice. Not revenge, we want justice. We want justice. We want to go back to our homeland. We want to go back to our native land. And we have our culture, we have our civilization, we have our land. Many years, Burmese government, they taken away all the things. Finally, they took in 2017 our land. So we want to go back with dignity, with safety, with protection, with our right, restoring our rights. We are not demanding, you know, a state or anything. We belong to Burma. We want to get back our rights, what Burmese government been taken away. So what is justice mean to the Rohingya people is, you know, is several things. It means holding those responsible for genocide against us to account after independent investigations and before independent civilian court. This is not possible in Myanmar at the moment. Myanmar government is capable of this. The investigations are only serving whitewash military atrocities and will not lead to those most responsible, like Senior General May Online being held to account. But justice is also about ending the ongoing genocide against us. It means restoring our rights to a nationality, freedom of movement, practice our religion freely, send out our children to school, access medical care if we need it. It means ensuring hundreds of thousands of refugees can return to their home. International justice is not an exact science. We need to push on several fronts. What is happening at the ICJ and ICC is hugely positive. I would like to express many thanks to Gambia, Netherlands, and Canada. Solidarity showing with Rohingya for the Rohingya people, for your interest for the justice for the Rohingya. Our organization, Burmese Rohingya Organization UK, we also tried a different path, universal jurisdiction. This is based on the idea that some crimes are so horrible that concern humanity as a whole and can be tried anywhere, regardless of where they were committed or from where the perpetrator is. Rohingya genocide is definitely one such crime. In November last year, we launched universal jurisdiction case in Argentina, where judiciary has a history of trying such a case, including over Francisco Franco fascist era in Spain, and we were supported by Thomas Cantena, former UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Burma, Latin American NGOs that work on the same issue. Our case focused the role of Myanmar civilian and military leadership in the genocide against Rohingya. Important to not just to highlight the role of Me Online and General, but also Aung San Suu Kyi complicit in the genocide. The case sent a strong message to international support, global fight against impunity. Argentina showing support in the same way Gambia. The universal jurisdiction case is a pressure tool as much as a legal tool. Keeps the pressure on Myanmar. Universal jurisdiction is one of many tools in toolbox. International justice, important to use our tools all available. We need international support to bring justice. We encourage, especially UK government, to join with Netherlands and Canada to support International Court of Justice. You know, without justice, there is no way for us to return in Myanmar. Also, I would like to point out here, election is coming in Burma. Rohingya have been participated in election since 1933 to until 2010. What election going on in Burma is a stepping stone, is appetite election. We would like to urge governments, including British government, you know, to speak up that exclusion of Rohingya, and, you know, international election is not a transition to democracy. You know, this is NLD government, you know, actually trying to make silent of some opposition, including media, you know, is going backwards, I have to say frankly. You can see many ethnic areas, Rohingya MPs, candidates been cancelled last few days ago.
Mr. Chun Kin, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up if you wouldn't mind, please.
Sure, thank you. So in Burma, not only Rohingya, other minorities were facing. Our sister community, Rakhine brothers and sisters who are living side by side with us, they are facing war crimes and crimes against humanity. Last month, our Rohingya organization internationally showing a solidarity. We are together with everyone. We are as not, for me, for Rohingyas, we all supported Aung San Suu Kyi and worked for the human rights and democracy for Burma many years. Unfortunately, she is not standing up. Instead, she is, you know, taking side of the military to whitewash these atrocities, what happened to our brothers and sisters in our Rakhine state. And today now, our Rakhine brothers and sisters, the situation is getting worse. NLD government is not allowing humanitarian aid. And so as a Rohingya myself, to get on behalf of Rohingya people, I would like to ensure that it's not only we talking for the Rohingya, other minorities in Burma, they are facing injustice. This justice mechanism can bring not only justice for the Rohingya, other minorities in Burma, they will be relieved from, they will see justice. So international community should support, you know, ICJ, UK government and other countries should support ICJ case, and sanctions to military and military-related companies is important. And please continue your support and your solidarity for the Rohingya people. And I would like to express all the speakers, many thanks again for your continued support. Please do not forget Rohingya people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tunkin. I apologize for asking you to cut short, but we do have other speakers who want to get in here, and we're running late already. If I can turn now to Ms. Rushanara Ali, MP, who is the chair of the UK's all-party parliamentary group on Rohingya. Ms. Ali is also the first person of Bangladeshi origin to have been elected to the UK House of Commons, and is one of the UK's first female Muslim members of parliament. Ms. Ali, can I ask you for your comments now, please? Can we make sure Ms. Ali's microphone is working, please?
Yep. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Well, Ministers, distinguished guests, ambassadors, high commissioners, Assalamu alaikum. I want to, first of all, start off by thanking the Commonwealth Secretary General, Baroness Patricia Scotland, the High Commissioners, Bangladesh, Canada, and the other partners, and of course, our esteemed chair for hosting us today. It's an absolute honor to be part of this discussion with such enormous expertise in this gathering. And for me, it's so important that we have been able to come together to look at how we address the challenges facing the Rohingya community, both within Myanmar, but also in Bangladesh and elsewhere in the world. So I'm conscious that we have the Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, as well as our Foreign Minister and High Commissioner speaking soon. So I'm going to just reflect on a few things. First of all, as a parliamentarian, and secondly, in terms of my work in relation to this very important issue. I've been very exercised by what has been happening in Myanmar ever since I became a member of parliament in 2010. The first time I went to Myanmar was in 2013, after the initial attacks in 2012, which displaced 100,000 people within Myanmar. And I visited Sitwe, I visited the camps with Refugees International, who I'm incredibly grateful to for opening my eyes, as well as that of many of my colleagues here in the British Parliament, to what was happening there. And of course, to the many campaigners who are in this discussion today and in the charitable world. And at the time, there wasn't a great deal of interest, unfortunately, in the international community, including in our own government, in what was happening. The UK government was very focused, along with the European Union, the US and other countries, in removing sanctions and opening up Burma for the transition to democracy. Of course, we were all very sympathetic to that after seeing decades of military rule and the human rights violations that we saw in that country. And we all wanted to see that transition succeed. But there was an important area that I feel the international community overlooked, which was the removal of sanctions without proper conditions to protect minorities. And the Rohingya population and other minorities, including, of course, in Kachin and elsewhere, they have paid the ultimate price. And frankly, the international community has, particularly my own government here in the UK, has let the Rohingya population down. Many of us warned the UK government in our parliament to remove sanctions gradually. The European Union, alongside other countries, moved to remove sanctions. And in a way, we need to look at these issues once again, because after years of what's happened subsequently, we haven't made as much progress as we should have done. I went back to Myanmar in 2017, and the situation continued to be even worse. And in the intervening period, of course, we saw that transition towards democracy, but not the kind of democracy that we had hoped to see. And what is staggering is the fact that despite the attacks in 2017 and the clear-cut case that has been made through the UN fact-finding mission that Dr. Yangi Lee and others have been involved with, numerous inquiries, that makes it very clear that genocide has been committed, that the international community hasn't been able to do as much as we had all hoped. And I think that it is absolutely horrific that we have allowed a country like Bangladesh to bear the brunt of this crisis without as much support as, frankly, it needs in order to provide for and support the 1 million refugees that now live in Bangladesh. And I'm incredibly grateful to the government of Bangladesh for being the host to the Rohingya refugees there. Now, of course, you know, as a critical friend of Bangladesh and as somebody of Bangladeshi heritage, I have been very clear about the areas where there needs to be improvement and lobbied the government of Bangladesh to help continue with improving access for NGOs and others to make sure that the refugee camp the conditions are appropriate and improved. But we in the international community do more to help those who are there, including providing the funding that's needed. Bangladesh is struggling to provide for its own population in the middle of a crisis. So we've got a responsibility, and the UK government has a responsibility. Within Myanmar, others have already talked about the internally displaced camps and the conditions. These are like prison camps, and the humanitarian access remains very, very limited. Many of you will know better than me how appalling it is. And I certainly saw that in the 2 visits I made to Rakhine State. And of course, ambassadors have made visits, and our former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, who's the co-chair of the Rights of the Rohingya group with me, paid a visit when he was Foreign Secretary, and there were stage-managed visits organized by the government of Myanmar. So where do we go from here? I think that the areas, despite the frustrations, despite the setbacks that have gone on for years, the area where we have scope for achieving justice lies in the ICJ case. And I'm incredibly grateful to the government of the Gambia for bringing that case, and of course other partners, including Bangladesh and others, for getting us this far. But frankly, I'm ashamed of the British government for not getting behind that case, as Canada and the Netherlands have done. And I and my colleagues will and have continued to put pressure on our government and our Foreign Secretary to get behind that case formally. It is a disgrace. The UK is the country that is the penholder in the UN Security Council in relation to Burma. As a former colonial power, the UK has a responsibility to get behind this case and achieve justice. And we haven't seen that so far, and we need action from our government. Secondly, I think that we need to do more with our partners at the European Union level, with the US and other partners, to impose appropriate targeted sanctions on military companies. Dr. Yangi Lee was talking earlier on about some of the companies. We need a much more concerted effort to apply pressure on the Burmese government where it hurts, on the economic dimension. We also need to make sure, as we face the elections, where the Rohingya have been excluded, like they were in the last election, even during the military period, this wasn't happening, that the Election Commission is held to account, that foreign powers don't fund election commissions that are prosecuting these sort of discriminatory policies. And of course, citizenship lies at the heart of all of this, that is well-versed, well-documented, that needs to be addressed. Without addressing these issues on multiple fronts, we're not going to get very far. The ICJ provides some hope for justice, but it's not going to be achieved by leaving the Gambia and a handful of other powers to lead the way without countries like the UK getting behind that case. And we hear time and again, in conclusion, we hear time and again our government and other governments saying never again. We heard it during the Rwandan genocide after that happened. And I noticed the Rwandan ambassadors on this call. We heard it after Bosnia. We heard it, of course, after the Second World War. We've heard it after many conflicts, never again. And right now, it's not just in relation to Myanmar, of course. We are seeing what's happening with the Uyghur Muslims in China. And yet again, our government stands by, and we hear excuse after excuses in relation to Myanmar as well as other conflicts where they can't act. And frankly, it's time that governments like ours stop treating minorities as collateral damage and actually take action. And that's why I hope that gatherings like this are then mobilized to keep the pressure on the international community and our individual governments to do more. Because if we don't take action, if we don't see justice achieved for the Rohingya in the face of a clear-cut case of genocide, then it sends a green light to dictators around the world to commit acts of genocide. And that cannot be right for the 21st century. It wasn't right for any other century, and we cannot let this happen once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ali, for very powerful comments. Our last speaker in this panel is Mr. Hussein Tomasi. Mr. Tomasi is a special advisor to the Justice Minister with the Ministry of Justice of the Gambia, where he has worked for over 25 years. We've heard a lot about the Gambia's leadership in taking this matter to the International Court with the support of other countries, but real leadership by the Gambia. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave the proceedings after Mr. Tomasi's comments to this group. I just want to say it's been very thought-provoking, very revealing, and also very energizing to see the vast support that so many of you have given to this challenging situation facing the Rohingya. And I'll remember forever the comment that justice is not an abstraction, atrocities have a name and a face. And the testimonies we've heard, particularly from Hassan Begum and from Mr. Tunkin about the situation facing the Rohingya, I think are very, very powerful statements that should stay with all of us. Mr. Tomasi, can I turn it back to you? And then my very good friend, the High Commissioner for Bangladesh will finish off the proceedings. Mr. Tomasi, please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. First, let me thank Canada and of course, Bangladesh for organizing this forum in collaboration with the Commonwealth Secretariat. And it's very important that we are bringing the Commonwealth Secretariat in this forum, of course, knowing its shared values of democracy, respect for human rights, and of course, opposition to all forms of racial oppression, intolerance, and commitment to the principles of human dignity and equality. Your Excellency, Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, Dr. Momen, Your Excellency, Dr. Ahmad, of course, I recognize the British Gambian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Mr. Francis Blaine, and of course, Professor Payam, one of the lawyers assisting us in the Rohingya case at International Court of Justice. First, let me say that it's important to acknowledge the magnanimous humanitarian contribution of Bangladesh in its open door policy in providing shelter to the Rohingyas, refugees, who are fleeing from the barbaric and atrocious crimes from Myanmar. I think we all know that this is creating a very severe problem on Bangladesh, and it's important that Bangladesh continues to exercise its humanitarian gesture, and it's important that Bangladesh is also supported by the international community. It's gratifying to note that the United Kingdom, the European Union, and the United Nations High Commission of Refugees will be hosting a conference actually in October, I believe, a couple of days' time, for the Rohingya refugees and host countries. I want to reiterate something, and as has been stated here, for us in the Gambia, we believe that human rights are inherent to all human beings everywhere in the world. And as Sridhar Ramphal, one-time Secretary General of the Commonwealth, has stated, the dignity of man is everywhere affronted when the human personality is anywhere degraded. It is in this light that the conscience of the world should be awakened to what is happening to the Rohingya in Myanmar, which is nothing but genocide of the Rohingya. The Rohingya have suffered the barbarity of mass killings, mass rape, killing and burning of children in sanctuary of their homes and places of worship, destruction of their homes and properties, all in an attempt to exterminate them. To exterminate them for the simple reason that they were born to a different race and a different religion from those who are perpetuating these horrible crimes on them. The world cannot continue to be indifferent to sufferings of the Rohingyas. We in Gambia have encountered 2 decades of brutal dictatorship and suffering in our own country. And this has taught us the moral lesson that we must take a high moral ground. We must use our voice to condemn oppression and stand for justice whenever and wherever it occurs. And this is why we principally took the decision to file the case, of course, against Myanmar, accusing Myanmar of genocide. Both Myanmar and the Gambia are signatories to the 1948 Genocide Convention. Of course, the case was brought up with support from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which has tasked the Gambia to look into how Myanmar can be brought to justice, following the Gambia's initiative to seek justice for the Rohingya. And as Professor Payam has told this body, as a part of the measures the Gambia sought were provisional measures, which were granted unanimously by the court. And Myanmar was required by the court to file reports to ensure compliance or to state measures that it has taken to implement the orders of the court. Incidentally, Myanmar filed its first report, and obviously in that report, Myanmar has sought to convince the court that it's taking measures to ensure the safe and dignified return of the Rohingya to their territory, and as well as promoting reconciliation. We know that this is false. The situation on the ground in Myanmar is that the Rohingyas are still in a dire situation. Their conditions have certainly not improved. The report we are getting from organizations like the International Crisis Group and organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, is that the reality on the ground is there. Oppressive and systematic restrictions are still being imposed in the Rakhine State, which may be indicative of ongoing genocide. Reports have also further indicated that the Rohingya who remain in Rakhine State have seen no meaningful improvement in living conditions. Many remain in squalid displacement camps and are confined in isolated villages, in apartheid-like bans, limited access to hospitals, schools are mostly segregated, and freedom of movement remains curtailed. Restrictions on access further compounded the plight. We have raised this issue several times, and I will reiterate this point. And it has been reiterated by the former Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, as well as Mr. Maung Tung Ting, President of the Burmese Rohingya Organization. Myanmar must be committed and take serious steps to remove all the discriminatory laws it has against the Rohingya. Myanmar continues to deny the Rohingya as citizens of Myanmar. In fact, they are referred to as illegal immigrants. They are referred to as Bengalis, whereas they are indigenous people of Myanmar. Myanmar, as a first step, must work towards amendment of its constitution to recognize the Rohingyas as an ethnic group of Myanmar. This must be a fundamental step that Myanmar has to take. Myanmar has to implement laws to show that it recognizes the Rohingyas as citizens of Myanmar. These two issues are very important, and they are conditions sine qua non for any return, or for anyone to talk of return of the Rohingyas back to Myanmar. It will take a long time for us to conclude the case at the International Court of Justice. I need to point out that the world cannot wait. There's a lot to be emphasized on this forum. Need to return to their homeland. This is where they belong. I believe it's essential that this forum takes this stance, and the Commonwealth Secretariat takes the position together with all the members in the Commonwealth to ensure that the Security Council takes steps to ensure the return of the Rohingyas back to Rakhine, back to where they belong, back to Myanmar. The Security Council can do so. It has done so. It has authorized UN missions in some other countries in conflict. It has done so in South Sudan, it has done so in the Democratic Republic of Congo, it has done so in India, Pakistan, as well as in Cyprus. The UN must work towards deployment of a mission, a peacekeeping mission, to ensure protection of the Rohingyas when they return, as well as guarantee their human rights and also access to humanitarian assistance. If we do not have a situation like that, I'm afraid we'll only continue talking and talking about return of the Rohingyas. Because left to Myanmar alone, or left to bilateral arrangements that will be arranged between Bangladesh and Myanmar, these would be insufficient to guarantee a safe and dignified return of the Rohingyas. I just want to thank the Commonwealth Secretariat for being involved in this important forum. And I think even in the long run, the Commonwealth may continue to encourage a pathway for even Myanmar to join the Commonwealth so that it can join the civilized world and it can join in sharing the values that we all know the Commonwealth to be made of and comprise. I think on that note, I just want to thank all the speakers and thank you, Your Excellencies, for the sentiments that you have expressed in Gambia's position in taking this case to the International Court of Justice. We are humble, but we believe as part of the international community, we owe it a duty. Wherever human rights are being violated and wherever people are being suppressed, each and every individual, each and every country in this world has a duty to ensure that it stops to that. We cannot continue to entertain genocide long since when we said never again after the Second World War. We still continue to see genocide rearing its ugly head. It's time for it to stop and for the international community to rally against it and say it must stop. Of course, we welcome efforts. We continue to thank the countries that continue to rally behind us. We now see the presence of Canada, Netherlands, all of them joining us, making declarations to this effect. And as stated by the Honorable Member of Parliament of the United Kingdom, the UK must join this international effort. I thank you all, Your Excellencies, and for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Hussein Tomasi, the advisor to Justice Minister of the Gambia. He's also of the rank of State Minister. Thank you so much for your statements and all your recommendations. Before I go to the last segment of our program, where we have our guest of honor, the Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, Honorable State Minister, the FCDO, and also our Honorable Foreign Minister, I would just like to wrap up that, we've had a very good panel discussion, which Janice was supposed to do, and she left me to it. But just, I think in the line of 4 major recommendations have come up. In terms of Myanmar, what to do, people have said, all the panelists have said that without changing the citizenship law of 1982 and removing all the discriminatory human rights laws against that discriminates against the Rohingyas, there will be absolutely no way that justice will be delivered and Rohingyas can actually go back. The other recommendation that came is that the sanctions were withdrawn a bit prematurely. International community should have watched Myanmar's behavior and then remove the sanctions. The other one that came is that the evidences must be preserved, particularly the ones that are in Bangladesh, and to the extent possible. So with these few words, I now want to invite Lord Ahmed. And before that, I just want to mention that Lord Ahmed has been Minister of FCO since 2017, and during the Rohingya mass exodus into Bangladesh, he was at the FCO minister, looking after, at that time, also Commonwealth and UN. He's been an integral part of the Foreign Office team that has been working on the Rohingya issue, and we are extremely grateful to him for the fact that he has been leading this issue. He's looking after South Asia. He's been looking after the Rohingya issue, and I think this time at the UN General Assembly, on his statement of the responsibility to protect, he started his statement quoting the Rohingya crisis that that Myanmar has failed to protect its citizens. So we're extremely grateful he's here today as guest of honor, and you have the floor. Just before giving you a floor, I would like to quote Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, who has quoted on 15 October, the Rohingya people have faced horrific brutality and were forced to flee their homes in the worst circumstances imaginable. We have taken action against the atrocities of this systematic violence, including through sanctions. and we will continue to hold those responsible to account. We know that UK had put sanctions against 2 of the Fatwa, but now it has extended to 14. So we welcome that. And there was one recommendation for the UK government to join the ICJ, Netherlands and Canada. Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. Honourable Foreign Minister Abdul Momin, Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's a real honour to be with you, albeit virtually. May I from the outset thank the Secretary General of the Commonwealth and also thank the Bangladeshi and Canadian High Commissions, in particularly yourself, Your Excellency, High Commissioner of Bangladesh, Sayyidah Mona Tasneem, and Your Excellency Janice Charat for co-chairing today's event. And I'm extremely grateful for your work in ensuring the Rohingya crisis remains very firmly on the international agenda. As you rightly said, Your Excellency, you quoted the Right Honourable Foreign Secretary as you introduced me. That is the essence, that is the priority the United Kingdom attaches to the importance of this issue. And as we look back, it's now almost 3 years since the events of the 25th of August 2017, and the scale of violence and atrocities that took place against the Rohingya, the ethnic cleansing that took place against the Rohingya in Rakhine State is no less shocking and appalling than what it was then. And at this point, I'm sure I speak for everyone on this call and beyond, we pay tribute to the resilience, the courage, some of which we've already heard on this event today, and the tenacity of the Rohingya people themselves in the face of extreme adversity and oppression, but also the generosity, if I may say, of the government and the people of Bangladesh for hosting the refugees in Cox's Bazar, something that I've seen directly for myself. And let me assure you this from the outset, that the United Kingdom will continue to stand alongside both the Rohingya community and the government of Bangladesh. We recognize the need to support the Rohingya community on both sides of the border, whilst we push for a lasting political solution to the crisis, which ensures the safety, security of the Rohingya community. And let me also add this. I was somewhat saddened to hear my colleague from the British Parliament, the chair of the APPG, Rafana Ali, talk about that the United Kingdom does not regard this situation as a priority. And I hope in my comments that those who are listening in will see the facts are somewhat different. First and foremost, we remain at the forefront of the donations we give to support the Rohingya community. Indeed, we remain the second largest donor to the response in Bangladesh itself, providing £256 million since August 2017. This has included providing emergency life-saving help, reduced the impact of natural disasters and disease, and supported the almost 860,000 plus refugees, as well as local communities. We are also providing the Rohingya community who remain in Myanmar with life-saving support. Indeed, as was mentioned by the representative of Gambia, in Tuesday's time, along with the US, EU, and UNHCR, we are co-hosting an international conference on ensuring sustainable funding. But it's not just about funding. Ultimately, the Rohingya community must be able to return to Myanmar voluntarily, safely, and with dignity. And a commitment to civilian protection and a cessation of hostilities are vital from all sides. We are also clear that the plight of the Rohingya community warrants international attention and indeed action. And let me assure you of this, High Commissioner. As you know, I'm also the minister responsible for the United Nations. And together with other partners, we have convened the United Nations Security Council 3 times this year to push for progress on the point you raised in your introduction on the International Court of Justice provisional measures, on de-escalation of fighting, and on greater humanitarian access. We have also called on Myanmar to ensure the protection of civilians and humanitarian workers. We want to see the implementation of the Rakhine Advisory Commission recommendations, including reform of citizenship laws and indeed freedom of movement. This is fundamental to giving the Rohingya community, the Rohingya people, the confidence that it's safe to return to their homes. Now, accountability rightly was mentioned, and accountability for the atrocities in Rakhine is imperative. Without that, the Rohingya people will not feel safe to go back, and I amplify what others have said, what our Foreign Secretary has said, what our Prime Minister has said, that justice must be done. And as you will know, indeed both your excellencies will know, in my work as the Prime Minister's Special Representative on preventing sexual violence in conflict, this holds particular resonance. And let me assure you, we support the International Court of Justice Provisional Measures ruling. Indeed, recently when my colleague, the Minister of State for Asia, spoke to the Myanmar Minister for International Cooperation this June, he urged Myanmar to continue to engage constructively and transparently with the ICJ process. And let me say once again, we continue to call upon the government of Myanmar to abide by the ruling to protect the Rohingya community. And let me assure everyone, we are pressing Myanmar to make progress on accountability, as we called in our recent statement at the UN Security Council on the 11th of September. In July, we established the Global Human Rights Sanctions Regime, which Your Excellency acknowledged, responding to the UN fact-finding mission and Rohingya leaders. We were at the forefront of listing Myanmar's military commander-in-chief and his deputy for their role in directing the atrocities against the Rohingya community. This, I'm sure all would acknowledge, sent a clear message that we regard them as amongst the most serious of human rights violators. The United Kingdom will continue to use our role on the United Nations Security Council to highlight the plight of the Rohingya. We are committed to reaching a long-term and durable solution to this crisis. In conclusion, Your Excellency, this horrendous situation, this humanitarian crisis demands the international community's full and continued attention. And I speak for the United Kingdom, recognizing and acknowledging the immense challenge that Bangladesh continues to have, but resolute in our friendship and constructive engagement with Bangladesh, but importantly in standing up for the Rohingya community, that we will continue to act as a global force for good. We will continue to do everything we can to help the Rohingya community to achieve both justice and accountability, and ultimately to enable them to return home through safe and lasting returns. And equally, as we continue upon that ambition and common aim to assist Bangladesh in its continued support, its humanitarian support in accommodating the Rohingya community at their time of need. This is a genuine humanitarian and human rights tragedy. And we, the United Kingdom, I assure you, will not walk by on the other side. We remain committed to doing all we can in resolving this crisis with our international partners. And I thank you for this opportunity, for allowing me to express our solidarity with both Bangladesh and the Rohingya community. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Lord Ahmed. That was a very powerful statement in itself, and you had reaffirmed your government's commitment that you would stand by the justice and accountability agenda that currently the entire world wants to see, particularly the United Kingdom take, because they are the pen holder at the UN Security Council. What's important is that you have not only reaffirmed that. I want to thank you for all the support you've been giving to, in the Security Council, the leadership that you're taking, including the 11th September Security Council statement. I thought that was a very strong statement. Unfortunately, it was just 8 members who joined it, and the 7 members couldn't join it. And I think that's the geopolitical divide on the issue of Rohingya. And we really hope that there'll be consensus and UK will be able to achieve it in the Security Council. And I just wanted to mention that, at the Commonwealth, You weren't there when our permanent Undersecretary, Ambassador Masood bin Momen, had made his keynote speech. And during the speech, he made a recommendation for your consideration as the chair in office and also for Rwanda's. That is, during the Kigali summit, whether we can have a separate declaration on the justice and accountability of the Rohingya. Since 2018, a lot has happened. And the ICJ court verdict has also, provisional measures have come out. This case undergoing at the ICC, and our Rohingya representative just said that he has filed the case at the courts of Argentina. So with all that judicial mechanisms going on, whether we can consider this in the Commonwealth would be my foreign secretary's request to you for your consideration as chair in office. So I'll hope that you will consider it. I now have the honor to request the chief guest of this program, and I'm eternally grateful and extremely grateful to Honorable Foreign Minister for being so patient. We have overrun the time, and I know that he came back from Sylhet, his constituency, early to join this program. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Honorable Foreign Minister was our permanent representative in New York for 7 years. He's been dealing with this Rohingya case as well. It just never goes away. It has always been there. And today he has joined us as the chief guest to have the last say in this matter. You have the floor, Honorable Foreign Minister.
Thank you, Mona. His Excellency, the Lord Ahmed Wellington, UK FCD Minister, His Excellency Hussein Tomasi, Special Advisor to the Justice Minister of the Gambia, Her Excellency Baroness Patricia Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Right Honorable Rushna Ali, Member of Parliament, Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, His Excellency Masood bin Momen, today's keynote speaker, esteemed panelists, Excellencies, High Commissioners to the Commonwealth, and especially our High Commissioner Saida Mona Tasnim, and Canadian High Commissioner Janice Charrett. Ladies and gentlemen, at the very outset, I would like to pay my special tribute to Bangabandhu's Bangladesh founding father, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who never failed to stand next to oppressed people. And he pronounced in his maiden speech at the 29th UN General Assembly, and I quote, "The very struggle of Bangladesh symbolized the universal struggle for peace and justice. It was therefore only natural that Bangladesh from its very inception should stand firmly by the side of the oppressed people of the world," I unquote. Today, I also pay my respect to Bangabandhu's daughter, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who demonstrated unmatchable compassion and humanitarian leadership of the 21st century by giving refuge to more than 840,000 most persecuted Rohingyas from Myanmar in August 2017. She said at a public meeting of the American Bangladeshi in Washington, D.C. in October 2017, and I quote, "If we can feed 165 million people of Bangladesh, we can also feed an additional 500 to 700,000 Rohingyas at their time of extreme distress. If necessary, we'll eat one meal a day and share another meal with the distressed Rohingya people. After all, we are human beings and we stand for humanity," unquote. It was indeed very encouraging listening at this virtual Commonwealth platform, valuable recommendation on sustainable solutions to Rohingya crisis, including Lord Ahmed's, representing the United Kingdom, the chair in office of the Commonwealth Secretary General, Baroness Patricia Scotland, Her Excellency Rushna Ali MP, the Gambia, Canada, Netherlands, our valued international experts, Rohingya representatives, and many more from our Commonwealth family standing next to the Rohingyas and Bangladesh. Bangladesh is grateful to all of them for the ethical and moral tasks that they have most sincerely performed, especially at the ICJ and ICC, and continue to do so to deliver justice to the Rohingyas and ensure accountability of their perpetrators. In the fourth year of Bangladesh hosting of 1.1 million forcibly displaced Rohingya from Myanmar, I would suffice to say only what our Prime Minister had said at the 75th UNGA on sustainable return of the Rohingyas, that, and I quote, "The Rohingya problem was created by Myanmar, and any sustainable solution for the return has to be found in Myanmar," unquote. Indeed, to make any return of the Rohingyas back to their country of origin, Myanmar, sustainable, safe, secure, and dignified, the most important prerequisite is the political will and conscience of the government of Myanmar. Ladies and gentlemen, historically, the Myanmar government demonstrated that they are fully capable of political will and ownership to earlier Rohingya crises, when they took back in 1978 around 200,000 of the Rohingya minority from Bangladesh, recognizing them as lawful residents of Myanmar following the 1978 Operation Dragon King induced influx. Myanmar also took back nearly 230,000 Rohingya from Bangladesh, recognizing them as, I quote, members of Myanmar society following the 1991 Operation Clean and Beautiful Nation induced influx. Bangladesh agreed to resolve the return of the Rohingya bilaterally with its close neighbor, Myanmar. In 2017, in spite of democratic government in Myanmar, the Rohingya crisis came back in unprecedented magnitude and severity, making it, in UN Secretary General's words, and I quote, "one of the world's most worst humanitarian and human rights crises," which according to the UN fact-finding mission was a result of, and I quote, "a pre-planned, well-coordinated, state-endorsed policy aimed at ethnic cleansing only of the Rohingya community of Myanmar with elements of genocide," unquote. Our Foreign Secretary has already briefed you that while Bangladesh signed with Myanmar the bilateral arrangement for return of displaced persons from Rakhine State in November 2017 and was meticulously preparing to repatriate the Rohingyas, both repatriation attempts in 2018 and 2019 fell through owing to sustained violence in the Rakhine State. The Rohingyas demanded guarantees and credible actions by Myanmar government on their legal status, their safety, security, equal rights, and freedom. Unfortunately, Myanmar government did not respond to any of their communications. This was a reminder for us that bilateral arrangement on sending Rohingya back to Myanmar was not enough. The crisis that kept re-erupting in 1978, 1991, and 2016 and 2017 would never find a sustainable solution unless the root causes of statelessness, systematic torture, racial discrimination, and absence of rights and freedom of the Rohingyas are urgently addressed by Myanmar, and the perpetrators of mass atrocities and genocide are brought to account as a trust and confidence building measure with Rohingyas. Dear friends, today, ensuring international justice and accountability for the Rohingya people is the call and the cry of the hour under every possible global investigative and accountability mechanism, making the Rohingya crisis truly global. Unfortunately, be it the decisions of the UN General Assembly, UNHCR, UN Secretary General Special Envoy, the UN Security Council, the ICJ, the ICC, the OIC, or the Commonwealth of Nations, Myanmar manages to defy them all and gets away with it. A dangerous culture of impunity and defiance is thriving. Even the ICJ provisional measures of 29 January 2020 is not being able to guarantee Myanmar's compliance of no more violence against Rohingyas or implementation of the critically important recommendations of the Kofi Annan or Rakhine Advisory Commission. Simultaneously, a culture of appeasement of Myanmar geopolitically through enhanced bilateral trade, investment and development assistance continues to grow, while the country has done nothing to redress the rape, gender and religious-based violence, mass atrocities and genocide committed on its minorities, that is neighbor in Bangladesh diligently continues to host in temporary camps that threatens its very security and sovereignty. We need to ask ourselves why. Because if this defiance, if this impunity and geopolitical appeasement of Myanmar continues, there will be no sustainable solution to the Rohingya crisis in near future. Ladies and gentlemen, at this critical juncture, when Bangladesh is overwhelmed and fatigued by the temporary hosting of 1.1 million Myanmar Rohingyas for the 4th year and is finding it increasingly difficult to shoulder this colossal humanitarian burden much longer, the world needs to stand next to Bangladesh and urgently find sustainable solutions in Myanmar. Bangladesh is grateful to the generous humanitarian assistance to the Rohingya camps and vulnerable populations in Myanmar by partners such as UK, US, UE, and their leaders who would be meeting day after tomorrow. In this regard, I call upon them not to lose sight that prolonged humanitarian assistance to Rohingyas in temporary shelters in a foreign country cannot be part of a sustainable returns and solution strategy or for securing the Rohingyas their right to return to their homeland in dignity and in honor. In fact, early repatriation is the answer. Here, I would like to particularly acknowledge United Kingdom's strong commitment to the Rohingya issue, their sustained humanitarian support to Rohingya camps, but more so for its consistent stance on accountability of Myanmar, including sanctions. We also highly value the pen-holding role of the United Kingdom at the UN Security Council, especially when the Council is divided on the Rohingya issue. And UK took lead to issue joint statement such that of 11 September last year, 2020, this year. We applaud UK for keeping the Rohingya issue on the Commonwealth's agenda. We hope that a chair in office of the Commonwealth, the UK will explore how to utilize Commonwealth's expertise in justice to provide advisory support to the ICJ's provisional measures, or at least create a Friends of Gambia club at the Commonwealth for promoting international justice and accountability for the Rohingyas. We call upon Commonwealth Secretary General to work with Rwanda for the Kigali summit to do more on Rohingya and fully endorse Bangladesh Foreign Secretary's call for the Kigali summit to adopt a separate declaration on international justice and accountability for the Rohingya towards finding a lasting solution to this protracted crisis. Excellencies, the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina applauds the Gambia's emboldened role on behalf of the OIC in taking on the Rohingya case at the ICJ and getting ICJ's provisional measures on Myanmar to end genocide and protect Rohingyas. I warmly acknowledge the noble decisions of our leading Commonwealth members, Canada and Bangladesh old friend Netherlands, for their intention to intervene in the Gambia versus Myanmar case. I call upon OIC countries also, members of the Commonwealth and Commonwealth countries, to follow their suit and support Gambia in seeking justice for the Rohingyas. I thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you so much, Honorable Foreign Minister, for your very clear messages and your statement. We've come towards the end of the program, but I just wanted to raise a couple of issues. Summing up, first of all, I'd like to thank our Honorable Permanent Under Secretary, Foreign Secretary Ambassador Masud Momen for giving us time for this program to the High Commission in London, and also Honorable State Minister of UK FCDO, our Lord Ahmed, and our Honorable Foreign Minister, and all the other speakers, particularly Mr. Hussein Tomasi, the advisor to Gambian Justice Minister, and every speaker that spoke today, and Mishnushna Radi, and of course my dear friend Janice, who been here and she can't be here, she just left. Everybody who spoke here today reflected on the Rohingya situation. From the Bangladesh Honorable Foreign Minister, recommendation is that of course, we are working very closely with the UK, and we are looking towards the UK to take some actions as Chair in Office of the Commonwealth. Number of suggestions have come. Number one, I already mentioned the separate declaration of the Kigali Summit. Rwanda being a symbol of a protest against genocide, whether we can do a separate declaration on international accountability and justice for the Rohingyas. And the other recommendation was, can we create a Friends of Gambia group at the Commonwealth? I think it's a doable thing. And the last one was whether the Commonwealth, within its, the Commonwealth's Justice Department, the Justice agenda or the Justice Arm is quite strong. Commonwealth provides different kinds of advice, whether they can also connect themselves with the ICJ's, team, and whether they can give some play some advisory role. And of course, UK to continue as Chair in Office until June. There's plenty of time if you would like to take any of these initiatives before the Kigali Summit. We look forward to that. But definitely, between 2018, when Lord Ahmed was State Minister and he worked closely with Bangladesh delegation to include a very substantive paragraph 50 in the declaration, we have to build on it at the Kigali Summit. And I absolutely look forward to working with him on that. And I want to thank our Honorable Foreign Minister for a number of recommendations, but I think he made it very clear that continuously giving $1 billion each year to support Rohingya, camps for forcibly displaced Rohingyas in Bangladesh is not the answer or the solution for sustainable returns. For sustainable returns, we have to ensure, and everybody said that, including the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Secretary, and of course, Lord Ahmed has also said that we have to take perpetrators into account, because Rohingyas gave the 13 demands to Bangladesh government, which we handed over. We've sent a note verbal to the Burmese government to consider this, because those 13 points are their charter demands. Unless they're met, and this demand is to the Myanmarese government, that if they do not give them some sort of legal status towards citizenship, if they don't give them freedom of movement, freedom of livelihood, if they don't allow them, to their own homes and keep them in IDPs, they're not going to go back. So when we talk about sustainable returns, and the whole purpose of this program was how to have sustainable returns pathways. And I think one of the pathways is that a number of recommendations have come, including reconsidering the sanctions, whether it was premature to withdraw it, or some other mechanism, or we can have a dialogue with those members of the Security Council who are currently, for different national reasons, are not supporting this issue. But we look up to the United Kingdom as the Chair in Office and also the Security Council pen holder to bring change. And I hope that this meeting has helped. We listened to so many experts who are currently involved in the international justice and accountability mechanisms throughout the UN and the ICJ and ICC, and I thank all of them. We are from the Bangladesh High Commission and the Canadian High Commission and the co-hosts of this event. And the third host was the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Secretary General. I am signing off. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I particularly want to thank the Bangladesh, all the ambassadors and high commissioners who joined from the Commonwealth. They've given a lot of comments to us on the many high commissioners from Africa and South Asia. Thank you very much for all your support. Even their ambassadors of South Korea had joined. Some of the ambassadors who are not in Commonwealth, but we invited them nevertheless, thinking that they're involved in some other the country. They've all joined and expressed solidarity with this meeting. I want to thank them. And Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and Commonwealth Communication Association, their heads have joined. I want to thank them for listening to all these. And I want to end by saying that we hope Bangladesh, UK, and Commonwealth will be working closely towards a sustainable returns formula. And we don't know what is that, but we need to get back on the dialogue table, to figure out what to do, because this cannot continue like this. This is like Myanmar is getting away with everything, but just one country in the world, it's like they're on planet Mars, and no one can touch them. This is pretty surprising, and I hope that it will change. And I know that the United Kingdom is really trying its best at the Security Council. In fact, they're the leader of the Security Council trying their best, but there are divisions. So with these words, I want to thank everyone and sign off. And I want to thank my junior team of Mahfuza, Shodipto, Munir, who really worked, our Deputy High Commissioner, everyone at the High Commissioner really worked hard for this. We had to get all these speakers. So, everyone confirmed, and I'm really grateful to them for organizing this. Thank you. সবাইকে সালাম জানাচ্ছি আমাদের আন্তরিক জানাচ্ছি হাই কমিশন থেকে, বিশেষ করে পররাষ্ট্র সচিব স্যারকে এবং মাননীয় পররাষ্ট্রমন্ত্রী স্যারকে আমাদের এখানে জয়েন করার জন্য ধন্যবাদ স্যার।
I see so many friends' faces here. My greetings to all of you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. And thanks to you. Thank you. Oh, many.